Get comfortable. Settle the pillow, let your shoulders drop, and let the room around you go quiet, because tonight we are going somewhere cold, and it will be much easier to enjoy the cold from somewhere warm. You have seen the picture already. Everyone has. Snow lying clean and blue on a London street, gas lamps burning orange through it, holly on the door, a carriage going by with bells, and a family gathered around a fire with their faces lit like a painting. Perhaps there is a goose. Perhaps there is a small boy with a very large hat. It is a lovely image, and it is worth knowing exactly where it came from, because it did not come from London. It came from the printing presses that were selling Christmas cards by the tens of millions in precisely the decade we are about to visit. That picture was a product. It was designed, colored, and sold to people who were living through the actual winter and wanted very badly to look at a nicer one. The real thing was not blue and clean. It was yellow. It smelled of coal smoke and wet horse and boiled cabbage, and it began every single day in the dark with somebody kneeling on a cold floor with their hands in yesterday's ashes. So that is where we are going, one winter day. Not a Christmas one, because Christmas is the exception, and the exception tells you nothing. An ordinary Tuesday in January, in the year 1897, in a narrow terraced house in Islington, north of the city, on a street of houses exactly like it. We will start before the sun comes up, which in London in January means we will start in real and total darkness. And we will go all the way through to the moment the last coal is banked down for the night, every hour of it. The fire, the fog, the food, the money, the laundry, the light, and the enormous quantity of skilled work that held a household of 5 people upright through 3 months of cold, and was never once written down as work by anybody. If you enjoy these, it does help me a great deal if you subscribe. And I always like reading where people are listening from and what time it is where you are, so leave that in the comments if you think of it before you drift off. You will not think of it. That is fine too. Now let the room go soft. Let the sounds of your own century thin out and fall away, and let us go back. It is Tuesday, the 19th of January, 1897. The place is Islington, a little north and east of the middle of London, on a street of 2-story brick houses built 40 years ago in a hurry, all of them the same, all of them with a bay window at the front and a strip of yard at the back and a coal cellar underneath the pavement outside the front door. You are 34 years old. Your husband is a railway clerk. He works in an office attached to one of the great northern termini, keeping accounts of goods traffic, and he earns something in the region of £140 a year. That is a specific and important number, so hold on to it, because almost everything else about this day is downstream of it. £140 a year puts you nowhere near wealth. It puts you nowhere near comfort, in the way you would understand comfort. What it puts you in is a very particular and very crowded stratum of late Victorian London, the lower middle class, the black-coated workers, the people who wear a clean collar to work and come home to a house where the roof leaks over the scullery. You have 3 living children. The eldest is 9, then 7, then the youngest at 4. They sleep in the small back bedroom, 2 in the bed and 1 in a truckle beside it, and in January they sleep in their stockings, and you have 1 servant, a general servant, sometimes called a maid-of-all-work, a girl of about 16 from a family in Hoxton who came to you 2 years ago and is paid £12 a year with her board and her bed. £12. Less than 5 shillings a week in cash for a working day that starts before yours does. She sleeps in the attic room at the top of the house, under the slates. Keep those 2 figures side by side in your mind, because they explain the whole shape of your life. £140 coming in, £12 going out to keep a girl in the house. You cannot really afford her. You cannot possibly manage without her. And the fact that you have her at all is the single most important thing about your family's position in the world, because a household with a servant is respectable, and a household without one is not, and the entire architecture of your existence is built on staying on the correct side of that line. Nothing about the way you live is comfortable. Everything about it is respectable. Those are not the same thing, and by the end of this day you will understand exactly how much labor is required to keep them apart. Now, it is 5:30 in the morning. You know it is 5:30 because the clock on the landing has struck, and because you have been awake for perhaps 4 minutes already, lying quite still under 3 blankets and a counterpane, and your husband's overcoat, which is laid across the foot of the bed in January and put back on the peg in April. The room is cold in a way that is difficult to convey to anyone who has only ever been cold outdoors. Outdoor cold is an event. You go into it, you come out of it. This is not that. This is the ordinary resting temperature of the room you sleep in, and it has been this temperature since the 2nd week of November. There is no heating in this bedroom. There is a small iron grate in the wall, and it has not had a fire in it since one of the children was ill in the autumn, because a bedroom fire costs coal, and coal is money, and money is £140 a year divided by every single thing 5 people need. The first thing you do, before anything, is breathe out and watch it. Not deliberately. It simply happens. Your breath goes up towards the ceiling in a pale plume in the dark, and you can see it because there is a little grey light coming in around the edge of the curtain from the street lamp at the corner, which will not be turned out for another hour and a half. The air on your face is somewhere in the region of 5 or 6 degrees on the centigrade scale, which is to say around 40 on the Fahrenheit scale that you actually use. It is the temperature of a modern refrigerator. That is the room you are lying in, and in a moment you are going to have to get out of the bed and take your nightgown off in it. The second thing you do is put a hand out and touch the water jug on the washstand. It is one of a matched set, jug and basin, white with a blue band, bought second-hand and chipped on the lip of the basin where the previous owner knocked it. You filled the jug last night from the copper, and when you touch it now, in the dark, your fingers meet the surface of the water, and the surface does not move, because there is a skin of ice across it about as thick as a shilling. This is not remarkable. You do not remark on it. You press down with 2 fingers, and the ice gives with a small dry crack and folds under, and you leave it, because it will thaw a little once the house has been going an hour, and because you are not going to wash yet in any case. You lie there for 1 more moment, and you do the calculation that every woman in every one of those identical houses along this street is doing at almost exactly this instant. Downstairs, the kitchen range is out. It has been out since 10 o'clock last night. Until it is lit, there is no hot water in this house. Until there is hot water, there is no tea, no porridge, no washing, no shaving water for your husband, no warmth anywhere in any room. The entire day for 5 people and 1 servant is currently sitting inside a cold iron box in the back kitchen, waiting for somebody to kneel down in front of it. That somebody, this morning, is going to be you, because the girl was up late finishing the airing and you can hear that she is not moving yet in the attic, and because the truth of a household at your income is that the line between the mistress and the servant is a line you draw fresh every single day, and some mornings you draw it a little further back than other mornings. So you push the blankets down, the cold takes hold of you instantly and completely, right through the flannel of your nightgown, and you sit on the edge of the bed with your feet on bare boards because the rug is on your husband's side. He does not stir. He will get up at 10 minutes past 6, into a house that is already warm at the centre and already smells of tea, and he will not think about how that happened, not because he is unkind, but because in 1897 no arrangement in the world is more invisible than the one that produces a warm kitchen at 6 in the morning. You find your shawl on the chair by feel. you put it round your shoulders, you take the candlestick and the box of matches from the washstand, and you go out onto the landing where it is colder still and where the strip of coconut matting on the stairs is stiff with the cold under your bare feet, and you go down, one hand on the rail, into the dark to light the fire. The back kitchen in January, before any fire has been lit in it, is not really a room. It is a cold box with a door at one end and a window at the other, and the window has been weeping down its inside face all night, and the water has collected along the sill and frozen into a thin grey lip where it meets the paint. You set the candle on the table. The flame stands up straight and does not move, because there is no draught worth the name until the range starts to pull. And the stillness of the air in a cold kitchen is one of those things nobody writes down, and everybody who has ever done this knows immediately. You kneel down in front of the range on the sacking mat that lives there for exactly this purpose. The first job is the ash. Yesterday's fire has left the firebox packed with it, soft grey and still faintly warm at the very bottom if you have banked it properly the night before, and this morning you have. Which means the bars are not stone cold and the whole business will take you 35 minutes instead of an hour. You pull out the ash pan underneath and set it aside. You take the poker and rake the dead stuff down through the bars, and it comes down in a soft, collapsing rush, and the dust rises, and you turn your face away from it because there is no way to do this without breathing some of it, and you have long since stopped thinking of that as remarkable. Then you sift. Not all of what falls through is ash. Among it are cinders, the half-burned lumps that still hold fuel, and you separate them with a little wire sifter, and they go back into the firebox as the base of today's fire, because a household at your income does not throw away anything that will still burn. The true ash, the fine grey powder, goes into the pan, and the pan goes out to the yard, and some of it will be scattered on the path when the frost is bad, because ash on ice is the cheapest grip in England. Now you build. Twists of yesterday's newspaper first, laid loosely, not packed, because packed paper smothers itself. Then the wood, and the wood is not logs because you do not have logs. It is chopped up scraps of old packing case bought from the greengrocer, a bundle of thin sticks from the chandler's shop for a penny, split fine with a knife the evening before and left on the fender to dry out. You lay it crosswise over the paper in a rough lattice. Then the coal, and this is where judgment comes in because you do not tip the coal on. You place it. Small pieces first over the wood, close enough to catch each other but open enough to let air through, and then 2 or 3 larger lumps balanced above. You strike the match and hold it to the paper at the front, low down and then at the side, and you close the firebox door most of the way and leave a gap, and you open the damper wide so the flue will draw, and you sit back on your heels and listen. There is a moment of nothing. Then the paper takes with a soft, crumpling roar, and the sticks begin to tick and snap, and within 4 or 5 minutes you hear the particular sound of coal catching, which is a low, gritty, settling sound quite unlike wood, and a faint, sulphurous smell comes off it, and the room is not warm yet, not remotely, but it has stopped being dead. Now, before anything else happens in this house, let us talk about what is in that firebox. Because the coal is not a detail of this day. The coal is the day's whole foundation, and the household's entire winter is organized around getting it, storing it, burning it economically, and paying for it. Your coal comes from a merchant 3 streets away, and it arrives by cart drawn by 2 horses, driven by a man in a leather cape with a fold of sacking over his head and shoulders. It is delivered in sacks weighing 100 weight each, which is to say 112 pounds, carried on the back of one man, 1 sack at a time, from the cart to your pavement. In the pavement outside your front railings there is a round iron plate. The coalman lifts it, and the sack goes over his shoulder, and the coal goes down the chute into the cellar below your front step in a long, grinding roar that you can feel through the floorboards of the hall, and which every child in London recognizes before it can talk. The price. In the middle of the 1890s, best household coal delivered in London runs at something close to 1 shilling and 3p to 1 and 6p the hundredweight, which puts a ton at somewhere between 25 and 30 shillings, depending on the quality, the season, and whether you are buying by the ton or by the sack. Buying by the ton is cheaper. Buying by the single sack, or worse, by the quarter hundredweight from a shop, is dearer, and this is the first of 100 small facts about poverty that you already know without ever having been taught it, that the less money you have on any given day, the more everything costs you. You buy by the ton when you can because you have the cellar to put it in, and that cellar is a form of wealth. It is not a large form, but it is real, and a family in 2 rooms up a stair has nowhere to keep a ton of coal and therefore pays perhaps a third more for every scuttle they burn, all winter, every winter. Now the quantity. Your range is alight from 5:30 in the morning until you bank it near 11 at night, 17 hours every day without exception from October to April. It cooks everything the household eats. It heats every drop of hot water that is used for washing bodies, washing dishes, washing floors, and washing clothes. It dries the laundry, warms the flat irons, airs the beds. On top of that, on a hard January day, you will light the sitting room grate in the evening, and on a Sunday, the parlour. Between them, in the coldest quarter of the year, this house burns something in the neighbourhood of 1.5 tons of coal in 13 weeks. Call that £2 or a little more for the quarter, against your husband's salary of £140 a year, which comes to about £2 14 shillings a week. The winter coal bill is running at something like a week and a half of his wages, spread over 3 months, gone entirely up the chimney. It buys nothing you can keep. It leaves no object in the house at the end of it. It is simply the price of the house being habitable, and you pay it every year. And it is the single largest item in your budget after rent and food, which is why the way you laid that fire 5 minutes ago matters. A fire built carelessly, packed too tight, and started with too much coal on it will burn through half again as much fuel in a morning as a fire built with sifted cinders at the base and coal placed a lump at a time. Over a winter, the difference between a woman who knows how to lay a fire and a woman who does not is measurable in shillings, and shillings in this house are the unit in which all decisions are actually made. The range itself deserves a moment. It is a closed cast-iron range of the kind that has largely replaced the open hearth in London houses over the past 40 years, and it is a single machine performing 4 jobs at once. At the centre is the firebox behind bars with a damper above it that lets you send the heat either straight up the chimney or sideways around the oven. To one side is the oven, a black iron cavity with no thermometer, no dial, and no thermostat of any kind. To the other side or behind is the boiler, a tank of water heated directly by the fire with a brass tap at the front, and every drop of hot water that this household of 6 people uses in a day comes out of that tap, 1 jugful at a time. On the top is the hot plate, and set into the hot plate are removable iron rings, so that a pot can sit directly over the flame or be shifted an inch to a cooler zone. There is no other reliable heat in this house. There are grates in the sitting room, in the parlour, and in 2 of the bedrooms, and they are lit rarely and briefly and for reasons that always come down to money. The range is lit always, which is why, from the first week of November to the last week of March, the back kitchen is where this family lives, and the rest of the house becomes a kind of cold storage that you pass through quickly on your way to bed, and the iron has to be kept. Cast iron in a London winter in a room that fills with steam every time the copper is used and streams with condensation every morning will go orange with rust in a fortnight if it is left alone. So twice a week, and properly once, you black it. Black lead, which comes as a paste or a cake, is worked onto the cold iron with a brush, and then buffed with a second brush and a cloth until the whole range comes up to a dull, even gunmetal shine. It takes the better part of an hour. It turns your hands and your apron a colour that no soap entirely removes, and it is the reason a kitchen range in a photograph from this decade looks like a piece of furniture rather than a lump of scrap. You will do it on Thursday, not today. Today, the fire has caught. You feel it before you see it, a change in the air against your face, and you get up off your knees and swing the kettle over, and the water in it is cold enough that it will be a full 15 minutes before it even thinks about singing. You open the damper another notch. You wipe your hands on the sacking. And here is the thing about warmth from a coal range, which nobody who has grown up with radiators has any idea about. It does not fill a room. It radiates outward from one point. And it is a fierce, roasting, uncomfortable heat within 3 feet of the bars. A pleasant heat at 4, and nothing at all at 7. Your face is beginning to burn. Your back, turned to the rest of the kitchen, is still perfectly cold, and will stay cold for another hour. You stand there in the small circle of it, with the candle now unnecessary and still burning on the table, and above your head, through the ceiling, the girl has finally started to move. You have been doing all of this in your nightgown, with a shawl pinned across your chest, and an old skirt pulled on over the top. Because nobody who lights a fire at 6 in the morning in January dresses first. Coal dust does not come out of good wool. So you have been half-clothed in the cold for the better part of 40 minutes, and now, with the range beginning to throw its small, fierce circle into the room, you can do the thing properly. You dress in the kitchen. That is the first fact worth sitting with, because it is not how the houses in the novels work. There is a bedroom upstairs with a washstand in it, and a chest of drawers and a looking-glass over the mantel, and that is where your clothes live. But the bedroom this morning is 41 degrees, and the kitchen is climbing past 50, and you are a practical woman. So you have brought your things down over your arm the way you do every morning between November and March, and you dress standing on the rag rug in front of the bars, turning yourself slowly like something on a spit, and the candle stays lit on the table because the one small window over the sink shows nothing yet but a grey that could be fog or could be the wall of the house behind. The order matters. It always matters, but in winter it matters more because each layer traps a little air against the one below it, and air, it turns out, is the actual insulation. Nobody has explained it to you in those terms. You simply know that 4 thin things are warmer than 2 thick ones, and that a woman who skips a layer in January regrets it by 11. The chemise first, calico, plain, to the knee, because it sits against your skin and takes the wear and the wash, so that the good wool above it does not have to. Then drawers, also calico, open at the seam the way drawers still are because a woman in 5 layers of skirt cannot manage anything more complicated. Then the combinations, which are the great quiet revolution of your lifetime. A single knitted woolen garment, vest and drawers in one piece, buttoned up the front, reaching from shoulder to knee with no gap at the waist for the cold to find. Your mother did not have these. Your mother wore a woolen vest and woolen drawers and spent every winter of her life with a cold stripe across her middle where the two failed to meet. Yours are merino. They cost 4 shillings and 9pence, and you own 2 pairs so that one can be washed while the other is worn. And if you had to choose one garment in this house to keep and burn all the rest, it would be these. Then the corset, not tightly. That needs saying because the picture in most people's heads is a woman being hauled into an hourglass by a maid with a foot braced against the bedpost, and that picture belongs to a particular slice of the wealthy and to the stage and to the cartoons in the comic papers. Yours is a plain coutil corset with steel bones, bought ready-made from a draper's for 6 shillings, and you lace it firmly rather than fiercely, and its actual function in your life is not the shape of your waist. It is support. You are 34, you have carried and fed 3 children, and you are about to spend 14 hours lifting a coal scuttle, a copper lid, a full kettle, a sash window, a laundry basket, and a 4-year-old. The corset holds your back. It also gives the skirts something to hang from, and the skirts by the time they are all on, are not light. 2. Petticoats. The under one is flannel, thick, warm, unlovely, and it is the layer doing the real work. Over that, a petticoat of a heavier cotton with a stiffened flounce round the hem, which is there to hold the outer skirt out and away from your legs so it does not wrap round them when you walk. Then the skirt itself, dark grey wool, gored, falling to the floor, and the bodice that matches it, hooked up the front, high at the neck. Over all of it the apron, which will be changed once before dinner and once again before your husband comes home. That is the morning. There is no version of this that is quicker, and there is no version of it done alone in under 12 minutes, and you do it every day of your life without thinking about it any more than you think about walking downstairs. Now, the wool. Because everything you have just put on that is doing any real work is wool, and it is worth understanding why and what the trade-offs were, since this is a decade in which people argued about it in print. Wool holds warmth when it is damp. Cotton and linen do not. A wet cotton chemise against the skin will pull the heat straight out of you, which is exactly what it is for in August, and exactly what will make you ill in January. Wool also breathes, which matters more than it sounds, because a woman working over a copper of boiling water in the morning and then walking a mile through freezing fog at 10:30 needs a fabric that can handle both. There is a whole doctrine about this, circulating in the papers just now, associated with a German physician named Jaeger, insisting that wool and only wool should touch the skin, and it has fashionable adherents and a shop on Regent Street and a great deal of ridicule. You have not read a word of it. You arrived at more or less the same conclusion by being cold. The problem is the hem. Your skirt reaches the floor, the pavements are wet from November to March, and horse traffic makes of a wet London road something that does not bear describing at length. So the hem of a winter skirt is not simply an edge of cloth. It is faced on the inside with a band of stiff woven braid, sometimes brush braid, which is exactly what the name suggests, a thick corded tape that takes all the abrasion and all the wet and all the filth, and which can be unpicked and replaced for a few pence when it wears through, saving the skirt. Every evening in winter, the hem gets brushed. You stand the skirt over the back of a chair once it has dried, and you go along it with a stiff brush, and the dried mud comes off in flakes onto newspaper. A wool skirt caught in the rain and left to dry with the road still in it will be ruined inside a season. Brushed properly, it lasts 5 years and then becomes a child's coat. Which brings you to the children still asleep, and to the pile of small clothes airing on the line strung above the range. 3 pairs of stockings, black, knitted by you in the evenings, sitting by this same fire, because bought stockings are 9pence a pair and children go through the heels of them at a rate that would frighten a horse. You knit, you also darn, and a stocking in this house will carry 2 or 3 darns at the heel before it is passed down or cut up. Boots are the expensive item and the one you cannot make. A pair of children's boots costs somewhere near 4 shillings and 6pence, and they will be resoled twice by the man on the corner at 9pence a time before they are done, and then they will go to the younger child, and the sole question of the winter, the one you turn over in your head in the small hours, is whether the middle one's boots will hold to March. A coat is worse. A new winter coat for a child of 8, bought ready-made, is somewhere between 8 and 12 shillings depending on the cloth, which is between 1/5 and 1/3 of what your husband brings home in a week, which is why you do not buy one. You turn last year's. You unpick the seams, you reverse the cloth so that the faded, worn face goes inward and the unbleached inside comes out. You let down the hem to the last thread of the tuck you left in it for exactly this purpose, and you set in a new collar cut from a piece of the sleeve of a coat of your own that went past saving in the spring. It costs you 7pence in thread and buttons and 3 evenings, and the result looks from more than a few feet away entirely respectable, which is the whole of the point. There is a word for all of this, and the word is not thrift, though thrift is what the magazines call it. It is textile management, continuous, skilled, and performed by every woman in every house on this street, simultaneously and separately, and none of it appears anywhere as work. Your hands are the last thing. You look at them in the candlelight while you fasten your cuffs, and the knuckles of the right hand and the middle joints of 2 fingers on the left are swollen and shining and a dull purplish red, and they itch in the heat of the fire in a way that makes you want to hold them against the cold iron of the sink instead. Chilblains. Everyone has them. Your husband has them on both heels, the eldest gets them on her ears, and the girl upstairs had them so badly on her feet last winter that she walked to the greengrocer's in a pair of your old slippers slit down the side. The cause is the thing you are doing right now, which is warming very cold hands too quickly, and everybody knows this and everybody does it anyway, because the alternative is to stay cold. The treatments are household ones, and there are dozens of them. Lanolin, if you can get it, rubbed in at night, camphorated oil, a cut raw onion dipped in salt and rubbed over the skin, which smells appalling and does about as much good as anything else. A neighbor swears by warm water with mustard in it. Somebody's mother swore by holding the hands in the steam off boiled potatoes. None of it cures anything. All of it is what you do while waiting for April. You pull your cuffs down over the worst of it and pin your hair quickly, without much attention, in front of the little mirror propped against the tea caddy, and you are still doing it when the ceiling creaks twice, and then there is the sound you have been waiting for since the fire caught. Feet on the back stairs, quick, because the stairwell is colder than the kitchen and everyone in this house hurries down it. A knock at the kitchen door, which is a politeness, since she has to come through it regardless. You say, "Come in." The room takes on another person, another set of cold hands going straight to the bars, and the day, which until now has been yours alone in the dark, becomes a thing that has to be run. She is 15, and she has been with you since the spring, and her name and yours are not the point of this morning. What matters is that she knows to fill the kettle before she does anything else, and she does. The porridge went into water last night, in the double saucepan, oats and salt and nothing else, standing on the hob's cool corner where the range's dying heat could work on them slowly for 8 hours. This is not thrift for its own sake. Oats cooked from cold in the morning take 3/4 of an hour and a great deal of fuel and constant stirring. Oats left to soak overnight take 15 minutes and one person's occasional attention, and the difference between those 2 facts is most of the reason the double saucepan exists. She stirs. You cut bread. The loaf is a 4-pound one from the baker at the corner of the street, bought yesterday, and it costs 5 pence, which is a price so stable across the whole of your adult life that you would notice a halfpenny's change on it the way you would notice a stranger in the passage. You cut it thick, and you cut it fast, and the heel goes on the board for your husband because he likes it, and because nobody else in the house will eat it. Dripping comes out of its basin in the larder, pale at the top where the fat has set and dark brown underneath where the meat juices have sunk and jellied. That brown layer is the best of it. Spread on hot toast with a scrape of salt. It is a thing people who grew up in houses like this one remember with real affection 60 years later. It is also, in plain terms, the reclaimed fat from Sunday's joint, kept in a cold larder for a week and used down to the last spoonful, and there is no household of your income that does not do this. The tea goes into the pot at 7:04. You warm the pot first with a swill of water off the kettle, tipped into the slop bowl, because tea made in a cold pot in a cold room goes tepid before the second cup, and you would rather spend 8 seconds than drink it. Your husband comes down at 7:07. He is dressed already, collar on, and his hat and umbrella are standing by the front door where they have been standing since he set them there last night, because a man who has to be at his desk at 8:30 in a January fog does not spend the morning looking for his hat. He eats standing for the first minute, which you dislike, and then sits, which you do not mention. Porridge, with milk poured round the edge. 2 slices of bread and dripping, 2 cups of tea, strong, with sugar. He reads yesterday's evening paper folded into quarters beside his plate and tells you one thing out of it, which this morning is something about the weather over the channel, and you say something back, and neither of you is fully awake, and both of you are perfectly content. At 7:20, he stands, takes his overcoat off the hook in the passage, and you go out with him as far as the door, and the cold that comes in when he opens it is not really cold so much as a solid thing arriving. He goes down the 3 steps into a street you cannot see the end of. The gas lamp on the far curb is a smudge the colour of a bruised apricot. Then the door is shut and the passage is dark again, and you go back to the kitchen, which after that 30 seconds feels tropical. Now, the children. They come down in the order they always come down, which is the eldest first because she is 9 and thinks it is a competition, then the middle one, then the youngest carried on the last stair because he has decided he cannot walk this morning and it is not worth the argument at 7:30. Their faces get washed at the kitchen table in a basin of water warmed on the hob, and every one of them objects, and every one of them objects less than they would if you had used the water from the jug upstairs, which currently has ice in it. Hair is done at the table, stockings are checked at the table, boots are found, and one boot is not found, and is found under the dresser. This takes 11 minutes and is the same 11 minutes every school morning of your life. They eat porridge and bread. The eldest gets tea, weak, mostly milk. The younger 2 get milk, which came yesterday and will come again this morning, and which you have kept in the larder on the coldest shelf covered with a beaded muslin cloth. In January, the milk keeps well. In July, it is a different conversation entirely, and one you are glad not to be having. At 9:05, 2 of them go out of the door for school with a slice of bread each in their pockets, and their scarves crossed over their chests and pinned at the back, which is the only arrangement that survives contact with a child, and you stand in the doorway and watch them until the fog takes them, which happens at about the 4th house down. Here is something worth slowing down over because it explains almost everything about what you will cook between now and March. It is January. There is no refrigeration in this house, no refrigeration in the shops you buy from, and the great cold stores at the docks are handling imported meat, not vegetables. What you can buy this week is what has kept since autumn, or what has come a long way by ship and rail. So, potatoes, which are the floor beneath everything, sold by the pound and eaten every day without comment. Carrots, turnips, Swedes, parsnips, all of them out of the clamp, all of them a little softer than they were in October. Onions, which keep beautifully and which you buy in a string. Cabbage, the hard winter kind, the sort that takes a knife's real weight to cut. Leeks, beetroot, dried peas and haricot beans soaked overnight the way the oats were. And then the preserved things which are where the century has actually changed your kitchen. Salt fish, herrings, fresh from the East Coast by rail, and bloaters, and kippers, tinned salmon from the Pacific coast of North America at about 7p a tin, which is a genuine luxury but a reachable one, and which shows up on more working tables in this decade than it ever did before. American bacon, cured and shipped and sold cheap enough that bacon has moved from Sunday food to ordinary food, condensed milk in tins with a picture on the label, golden syrup in a tin with a lion on it, which is barely 10 years old as a product and is already in every cupboard in the street. Fruit is where you feel the season most. There are apples still, wrinkling. There are Spanish oranges, and they are the thing, a penny or 3 halfpence each, bought 2 or 3 at a time, and there is no child in this house who does not know exactly how many oranges are in the bowl. Everything else that a summer table has is simply absent. No berries, no plums, no fresh peas, no lettuce, no cucumber, no tomatoes worth the name. What you have instead is jam made in August, standing in the larder under waxed paper discs, and you ration it without ever calling it rationing. Now the money, because the money is the whole shape of it. Your husband earns roughly £140 a year, which comes to somewhere near £2 14 shillings a week. Out of that, the largest single portion goes on food, and for a family of 5 plus a servant girl who is fed in the house, you are spending somewhere between 18 and 22 shillings a week to feed 6 people. That is not an estimate you have to make. It is a figure you know the way you know your own age because you handle it every Saturday. Bread runs to about 2 shillings and 6pence a week, 4 loaves, sometimes 5. Meat is the next great block, 5 or 6 shillings, and almost none of it prime. A piece of beef for Sunday, and after that shin, neck of mutton, breast, sausages and bones, always bones, bacon, a shilling or so. Milk, about 1 shilling and 3pence, at 3 halfpence a pint. Butter is dear, 1 shilling and 2pence the pound, so you buy half a pound and stretch it and use dripping for everything that will take dripping. Tea, 9pence for a quarter pound of something drinkable, and you drink a great deal of it. Sugar cheap now, 3pence or 4pence the pound, and you go through more than you would ever admit to. Potatoes and other vegetables, 2 shillings. Flour, oats, rice, salt, dried peas, another shilling and 6. Then the small things that are not food and come out of the same purse: soap, soda, blacklead, candles, matches and paraffin. Set that against the rest of the week's outgoings. Rent at 9 or 10 shillings for this house. Coal, gas, boots, clothing, the servants £12 a year, the penny a week to the burial club, the church collection, and you can see the whole of it at once, which is that there is no slack. There is nothing in this arithmetic that absorbs a shock. It works. It works well. And it works because you run it. And it would stop working within a fortnight of anything going wrong. The front door has been shut for 20 minutes now. The girl is scraping out the porridge saucepan into hot water. You stand for a moment in the middle of your own kitchen with your hands round the last of the tea in your cup, and it is quiet, properly quiet, in the way it will not be again until 9 o'clock tonight. Through the window, over the sink, there is no street. There is a rectangle of light that is not light, the colour of weak tea gone cold, and somewhere in it a cart going past, very slowly, the horse's feet coming through the glass before anything else does. The milk has not come. That is what takes you to the door, jug in hand, at 7:20 on a Tuesday morning in January, and it is the reason you get your first proper look at the day. You open the front door, and the cold does not come in the way you expect. It arrives slowly, the way water arrives in a boot, and beyond the step, there is nothing. The railing at the edge of your own tiny front area is there, blurred but present. The gate is a suggestion. The house opposite, which you have looked at every morning for 6 years, which has a green door and a broken fan light and a woman in it who irons on Wednesdays, is simply not there. There is no far side of the street. There is a wall of dirty yellow standing about 10 feet from your face, and it moves slightly, the way a curtain moves when someone has just walked past it. You can taste it before you have taken 2 breaths. Sulphur, mostly, and something under the sulphur that is closer to soot on the tongue, gritty, faintly sweet, the taste of a chimney you have leaned too close to. It gets into the back of the throat and settles there, and you will still be aware of it at 4 o'clock this afternoon. This is worth slowing down for because the fog is not weather. That is the thing to understand about it. There is fog in the countryside, of course, and there always has been, and it is white and damp, and it lifts. What is standing in your street this morning is something the city has manufactured, and it has been manufacturing it more or less continuously since the middle of the century, and it is at its worst in exactly the weeks when you are least able to do anything about it. Here is how it is made. Below you, the Thames, and a low-lying river basin, and cold, still air in January that will not move because there is no wind, and a lid of warmer air sitting on top of it, holding everything down. That is the natural half, and it gives you damp and mist and nothing worse than the other half. There are, in London at this moment, something in the region of 500,000 households, and nearly every one of them has lit at least one coal fire this morning for exactly the same reasons you lit yours. Because there is no other way to boil water, cook food, or be warm. Add to that the gasworks, of which there are several enormous ones on the river, and the breweries and the potteries and the chemical works and the railway locomotives and the steamers and the tanneries and the thousands of small workshops with their own small furnaces, all of them burning coal. All of them burning it imperfectly, because domestic grates and cheap industrial furnaces both waste a great deal of what they burn and send it up the chimney as smoke rather than turning it into heat. Every one of those chimneys is putting soot and sulphur and unburnt tar into air that has nowhere to go. The particles give the water, vapor, something to condense onto, so the mist does not stay mist. It thickens around several million specks of coal dust and holds them suspended at the height of a person's head. The result is not grey. It is the specific, dark, yellow-brown that people call a pea super, and the name is not a poetic flourish. It is a fairly literal description of the colour and near enough of the density. The worse the cold, the more fires are lit. The more fires are lit, the thicker the fog. The thicker the fog, the colder the house feels, and the more coal goes on. There is a loop in it, and everyone in the city is inside the loop, and nobody has the option of stepping out. You have lived with it your whole life, and you have made your household accommodate it, mostly without thinking of it as an accommodation. Consider what is actually different about this house because of the fog. The net curtains at the front window were white in October. They are not white now. They are the colour of a used dishcloth, and they will be washed again before Easter and will be that colour again by midsummer, because the fog comes through a closed sash as a matter of course. There is no such thing as a sealed window in this street. The sills, inside and out, need wiping down every single day, and if you leave them 3 days, you can write your name on them, and you have seen children do exactly that on other people's sills. Your husband's collars. He has a fresh one every day, and it is not vanity, and it is not even entirely respectability, though it is partly respectability. It is that a collar worn from Islington to the city and back through this is genuinely dirty by evening. And a clerk with a grey collar is a clerk who is noticed for the wrong reason. The cuffs go the same way. This is a large part of why the wash is what it is in this household, and why Monday is not enough and Tuesday absorbs the overflow. The washing itself, of course, cannot go out. There is a line in the yard, and it has not been used since before Christmas, and it will not be used again for weeks. Hang a boiled sheet out in this, and it comes in with a faint grey bloom on it and smelling of the fire, and all of Monday is wasted. So everything dries indoors, on the airer hoisted to the kitchen ceiling, and on the horse pulled up in front of the range. And that is why the whole house smells of damp wool from November to March, and why the ceiling above the range has that brown stain spreading out from the middle like something spilled. And the gas. It is 7:20 in the morning, and the lamp in your passage is lit, and it will be lit again by 3, and on days worse than this one, you would not turn it off at all. The street lamps outside were not put out at all this morning. The lamplighter came round at his usual hour before dawn, and simply did not bother with his pole because there was no point. In the shops along the Essex Road, the gas will be burning behind the windows all day, and if this thickens by afternoon, and it may, the drapers and the grocers will have every jet going at 2 o'clock, and it will still be dim inside. Schools have been known to send the children home at midday for want of light to read by. Whole days pass in which the sun rises and sets without anyone in the parish seeing it. What it does to the business of simply getting from one place to another is harder to imagine unless you have done it, and you have done it. You navigate by curb. That is the honest answer. You walk with one foot near the edge of the pavement, and you follow it, and you count crossings, and you know this route by the shape of the ground rather than by anything you can see. You know, There is a coal hole cover 40 paces down that stands slightly proud and will catch a boot. You know the pillar box is at the corner because you have put out a hand for it 100 times. Railings are a gift. A long run of railings you can trail your fingers along is the nearest thing this morning offers to a certainty. Other people are doing the same thing coming the other way, and so you meet at close range, suddenly apologizing, both of you appearing to the other out of nothing at a distance of about 4 feet. There is a particular etiquette to it that everyone knows and nobody has written down. You speak first before you are seen, so that whoever is coming toward you knows there is a person and not a lamp post. At the crossings, the traffic is the real difficulty because a horse and van moving at a walk makes very little noise on a wet road and arrives without warning. In the worst of it, the drivers get down and lead the horses by the head. The omnibus conductors go on foot in front of their own bus with a lamp held low, walking the whole route at walking pace, calling back to the driver, and a journey that takes 40 minutes on a clear day takes 2 hours and sometimes does not arrive at all. Boys appear on the corners with torches offering to light you home for a penny or two, which is a trade that was supposed to have died out with the last century and comes back every winter as though it never went anywhere. The river traffic stops. The steamers tie up. Trains stand outside the terminus for an hour because the signals cannot be seen. And this is a Tuesday. This is not an event. Nobody in this street will remark on it beyond the ordinary complaints. There will be perhaps 50 or 60 days like this between November and March, and a handful of them worse, and the city will simply slow down for each one and then carry on. The milk comes at last, 25 minutes late, and you hear the churn before you hear the man, the particular knock of the lid and the slop inside it. He comes up out of the yellow at your gate, looking as though he has been rubbed with a dirty cloth. His coat is grey at the shoulders and grey down the front, and there is a clean line across his forehead where his cap sits, and his eyebrows have gone the colour of ash. He tips the measure into your jug, and it is beautifully, absurdly white against everything else, the only clean thing on the doorstep. He says something about being all over the place this morning and having lost the round twice, and you say something back about it being thick, and neither of you means anything by it beyond the fact that 2 people have made a noise at each other in the fog, which is worth something. Then he is gone in 3 steps, and there is only the sound of the churn going away, and after that, not even that. You bring the jug in with both hands and close the door on it, and the passage smells of the outside for a moment, that sweet, burnt smell, before the kitchen takes over again. There is a mark on the tiles where you stood. You wipe the neck of the jug before you set it down, because it has been out there for less than a minute, and there is already a faint grit on the china that you can feel with a thumb. The scullery is colder than the kitchen by a good deal, and you feel it the moment you step through, the way the air changes against your face. It is a narrow room, brick-floored, with a stone sink under a small window and the copper in the corner, and it holds cold the way a cellar does, which in July is a mercy, and in January is not. The copper is a great round iron pot set into a brick housing with a fire grate beneath it, and yesterday it was going by 6 in the morning. Today it is dead, and its lid is on, and the brickwork around it still smells faintly of soap and hot iron. That smell will not really leave the house until Thursday. Yesterday was Monday. Monday is washing day, and has been washing day in nearly every street in this city for as long as anyone can remember, for reasons nobody bothers to defend anymore. The Sunday joint provides cold meat for Monday's dinner, so no one has to cook properly while the copper is going. That is the whole of it. A rhythm built around one roast, repeated across several million households, and repeated so consistently that on a Monday morning the smoke over the rooftops of North London thickens noticeably as every copper fire in every scullery is lit within the same hour. But washing day does not end on washing day. That is the thing nobody puts in the household manuals, or rather they put it in and then move briskly past it. In June you wash on Monday, and by Monday evening the yard line is full, and by Tuesday morning it is empty again, and the whole business is done. In January, the washing gets wet on Monday and then has nowhere on earth to go. So this is Tuesday, and the kitchen you are standing in is full of yesterday's clothes. There is an airer hoisted to the ceiling above the range, 4 wooden slats on a frame, hauled up on a cord that runs through a pulley and ties off on a cleat by the door. Every shirt your husband owns is on it. Below that, a wooden clothes horse stands open in front of the fire, angled to catch the heat, hung with sheets folded double over the rails. 2 towels are over the back of a chair. A pair of your daughter's stockings lies flat on the fender, which is the warmest surface in the room and also the one most likely to scorch, so they are turned every 20 minutes or so, and this is simply something you do without deciding to. The room is warm and it is damp, and the two together make an atmosphere with a particular character to it. The windows run with water. The wallpaper above the range has come away at one corner. There is a stain across the ceiling directly over the fire, a brownish bloom about the size of a dinner tray, and it has been getting slowly larger for 6 years, and it is the mark of a decade of steam rising off wet wool in a room with no ventilation to speak of. Here is what actually happened yesterday, because the word washing does a great deal of quiet work in concealing it. It began with water. Water had to be carried, bucket by bucket, from the scullery tap to the copper, which holds something in the region of 10 gallons, and 10 gallons of water weighs about 100 weight. Then the fire under the copper had to be lit and fed, and that is more coal on top of the range coal on a day when the range is also going. Meanwhile, the whites were sorted from the coloureds and the coloureds from the woolens, because a coloured print run into a white sheet is a disaster you cannot undo. Then the soaking, then the rubbing, a washboard, a bar of yellow soap, and your 2 hands, and the collar and cuffs of every shirt done individually, because that is where the dirt actually is. And in a city like this one, the dirt at a man's collar is not an abstraction. It is soot, greasy and fine, worked into the weave by a day of walking through what is outside your door this morning. Then boiling. The whites went into the copper with soda and were kept at the boil and stirred with a wooden dolly, a thing like a 3-legged stool on a broom handle, and turning that in 10 gallons of near-boiling washing is genuine physical work, the kind that makes your shoulders ache into the following day. Then out with the copper stick, into the rinse, then the blue. Blue is worth explaining because it looks like superstition and is not. White linen yellows with age and with washing. Nothing you can do prevents it, but a very faint blue tint counteracts the yellow to the eye, and the cloth reads as white again. So a small muslin bag of blue is swirled through the final rinse water until it takes on a colour like watered milk, and every white thing goes through it, and the housewife who blues too heavily produces sheets with a distinct grey lilac cast, and is judged for it by other women who can see it at 40 feet across a yard. Then starch, boiled up separately, for collars and cuffs and the fronts of shirts. Then wringing. You have a mangle in the scullery, 2 wooden rollers in an iron frame with a handle at the side, and it cost, when it was bought second-hand, about 15 shillings, which is not nothing and is one of the better decisions anyone in this house has made. Sheets are fed through it double and come out flattened and heavy and about 1/3 lighter than they went in. What the mangle cannot take is wrung by hand, which is done with a twist between 2 people, one at each end turning in opposite directions. Add it up. Soap at around 3p the bar, and you go through more than one. Soda by the pound, a penny or 2. Blue, a penny for a bag that lasts weeks. Starch, 2p. Extra coal under the copper. Call the materials 6p to 8p for the week, which sounds like nothing and is roughly the price of a pound of beef, spent on getting cloth clean every week, forever. And then the labour which is not costed anywhere at all, because it is yours. Now, there is a servant in this house, and this is where the arrangement becomes slightly awkward, and it is worth being honest about it. She is a general servant. She is 19. She has £12 a year and her board, and she sleeps in the attic, and she is the only servant, which means she is not a housemaid or a cook or a laundry maid, but all three at once, and none of them properly. In a household with 3 or 4 servants, washing goes out to a laundress or is done by a woman brought in specially, and the mistress of the house is entirely absent from it. In a household with none, the wife does every part of it alone. You are in between. You are in the exact place where a great many people in this city are, which is a place with 1 pair of hired hands and not enough of them. And the result is that you and the girl did yesterday's wash together. She carried most of the water and worked the mangle. You did the collars and the boiling and the bluing, because those are the parts where a mistake shows, and because you would not really be able to explain, if pressed, why you consider them yours except that you have always done them. And what you would say if a woman from a better street asked you at church is that the girl does the washing. You are not lying, exactly. You are doing something more interesting than lying. There is a line running through the middle of the social class you belong to, and the line is drawn at the point where a wife stops doing visible physical labor, and on the far side of that line sits respectability. Nobody can see into your scullery. So the household presents one version of itself outward and operates on another version inward, and this small, constant, entirely ordinary discrepancy is being maintained in some thousands of houses within a mile of where you are standing. It costs nothing to maintain except a certain vagueness in conversation, and everybody involved understands the rules perfectly, including the girl, who would also say that she does the washing and who has her own reasons. So today, the work of yesterday is still here, hanging over your head, giving off water. You reach up and turn the shirts on the airer. They have been up there since about 4 yesterday afternoon, and the bodies of them are dry, or nearly, but the double thicknesses are not, the seams and the cuffs and the yoke across the shoulders, and those are still cool and heavy to the touch. You turn them so that the damp parts face the rising heat. In summer, this would all be finished on the line by 2 in the afternoon with a wind through it. In January, there is no line because there is no air out there fit to hang anything in. And even on a clear, frosty day, the wash freezes stiff as board, and you bring in a shirt that stands up by itself. The sheets on the horse have to be refolded so that a new part faces the fire. You do this by feel, running the flat of your hand down the cloth and finding the cold patch and moving it. It is a small, exact skill, and you would not think to call it one. The stockings on the fender are ready. You take them off and put your daughter's mittens down in their place. Ironing is tomorrow, or the tail of today if the evening allows, and ironing has its own weather. Flat irons heated on the range, 2 or 3 of them going in rotation, one on the cloth while the others heat, and a piece of old blanket over the kitchen table for a board, and a scrap of cloth to test the heat, because an iron too hot will mark a shirt front, and an iron too cold will do nothing at all, and you will have to start again. That is Wednesday's problem. For now the room breathes wet wool at you. The window over the sink has gone entirely opaque with condensation, and a bead of it has run down and collected along the bottom of the frame, where the paint has been lifting for 2 winters. You wipe the sill with the corner of a cloth, which does nothing lasting, and put the cloth back over the rail, and stand for a second in the middle of your own steaming kitchen with the smell of soap and coal and damp cotton around you, and the fire ticking, and the fog pressed up flat against the glass on the other side waiting, 10:30, and the basket has to go out. You take the shawl down from the hook behind the kitchen door, the big one, grey wool with a fringe that has been knotted back on itself where it frayed, and you put it over your coat rather than under it, crossed at the front and pinned. The coat alone is not enough in January, and the shawl alone would let the wet through in an hour. 2 layers, one to keep the warmth in and one to take the weather. Your bonnet and the veil down, because of the fog and what it leaves on skin. Your boots are the older pair, because of the pavement. There is a word for what is on the pavement this morning, and none of the words are pleasant. It is snow that fell on Sunday, walked on by several thousand feet and driven over by a great deal of horse traffic, and then half thawed and half frozen again, so that what remains along the gutters is a grey-brown slush with a crust on it that gives way when you step. The crossing at the end of the road is worse. You go carefully, and you keep to the inside of the pavement where the shop fronts have kept a little of the ice off. The basket is on your left arm, and it has your purse in it and the small, stiff-backed book that the grocer writes in. Here is something worth slowing down for, because the shape of your morning is set entirely by a thing that does not exist in your house. There is no cold storage. There is a larder off the scullery with a slate shelf and a mesh-fronted safe. And in January, the larder is quite cold enough to keep butter hard and milk sweet for a day, sometimes two. But that is the whole of it. Meat bought on Monday is meat that must be eaten by Tuesday or made into something that will carry it a little further. There is no way to buy a week's food at once, and there is no advantage in trying. So you shop nearly every day, not as an errand, as a structure. The whole rhythm of the morning in every house on this street and most houses in this city is built around the fact that food arrives daily and in small quantities and must be walked home. That means you know the shops the way you know the rooms of your own house. The butcher first, because the butcher's window changes fastest. He is 3 streets over, a corner shop with the front standing open to the pavement in all weathers because meat keeps better cold and because the smell of a closed butcher's shop would empty it in a week. Sawdust on the floor, swept and thrown down fresh twice a day. The carcass is on the rail behind him. He has a coat that was white on Sunday. You do not buy the joint you would like. You buy the joint that will do. This is not a small distinction, and it is the whole art of the thing. The cuts that cost most are the ones that need least skill. A rib of beef needs an oven and an hour and no thought. What you buy needs 4 hours and attention and costs 1/3 as much. Scrag end of neck, breast of mutton, a piece of shin, the skirt, an ox cheek if he has one, and if you are quick. Bones, always, for nothing or for a penny, because bones with a little meat left on them and a night on the back of the range become the stock that carries 3 days of soup. He knows you take bones, and he keeps them under the counter for the women who ask. Prices in January are not the prices of August. Some of that is the beasts themselves, which are fed on hay and roots through the winter and come to market leaner and later. Some of it is that everyone wants the same warming, filling, slow-cooked things at the same time, and the cheap cuts are no longer a secret. Sweet goes up. Dripping goes up when you have to buy it rather than saving it, which you do not because you save every scrap of it in a white jar and it is worth its weight to you. You come away with a piece of mutton wrapped in newspaper and a paper of bones, and the wrapping is already cold against your arm through the basket. Then the greengrocer, who in January is a philosopher of roots, potatoes and more potatoes. Swedes, turnips, carrots, parsnips, onions, a cabbage or two of the hard blue-green winter kind that has been out under frost and is the better for it. Leeks, beetroot, that is very nearly the list. There are apples, kept since autumn and going a little soft in the shoulder, and there are oranges from Spain in a slatted crate, which are dear and which you buy sometimes 3 or 4 at a time, because a child with an orange in January has been given something more than fruit. What is not there is the point. There is no lettuce. There is nothing green and quick and raw. There are no beans, no peas, no strawberries, no tomatoes. The word for the season has not changed in 6 months and will not change until the first forced rhubarb comes in, which is soon, and which you look forward to more than you would admit out loud. A digression, because the number tells you something. Your household of 5 is fed on somewhere near 15 or 16 shillings a week when nothing goes wrong. Put roughly, and different weeks vary. Bread and flour take 3 shillings or a little over. Meat takes 4 or 5. Potatoes and vegetables perhaps 1 and 6pence. Milk a shilling. Butter and dripping and cheese another 1 and 6pence. Tea and sugar around 1 and 6pence. And then the smaller endless things. Salt, soap, soda, blacklead, matches, candles, gas, which are not food but come out of the same purse and cannot be separated from it. Against your husband's roughly 55 shillings a week, that is not comfort, but it is not the edge either. It is the specific position of a clerk's family, which is that you eat well enough as long as nothing at all goes wrong, and every purchase you make is decided by a person who is quietly keeping the arithmetic in her head while smiling at a shopkeeper. The grocer's is the warm one, and you spend a moment longer there than you strictly need. It smells of coffee, which you do not buy, and of soap and paraffin and dried fruit. Tea, sugar, rice, oats, a bar of yellow soap, a packet of soda. He weighs everything out of the drawers and canisters behind him and folds the paper into those neat blue cones. And it goes into your basket, and he takes down the book. Credit is how this works, and everybody knows it and nobody says it aloud. The grocer writes what you have had. On Saturday, when your husband is paid, you go in and settle. What that means is that the shopkeeper is carrying your household for 6 days of every 7, and that you are, in a very small way, in his debt at all times. It also means you cannot easily change grocers. The book ties you to him. A woman who is even a little behind on her book cannot walk into a rival shop because the second grocer will want to know why she has left the first. It is a soft rope, but it is a rope, and the price you pay at the shop where they know you is a shade higher than the price at the stall where they do not, and you pay it anyway, and you would explain if asked that he keeps good tea. Then the chandler's, on the corner, which is the shop for everything else. Candles, firewood in bundles, blacklead, a halfpenny worth of vinegar poured into your own bottle, small quantities of everything because small quantities are what people on this street can pay for, and a chandler who would not sell a pennyworth of anything would have no trade, out again, and the street. The road itself, at this hour and in this weather, is a thing you have to negotiate rather than cross. There are horses on it constantly. Vans, carts, a brewer's dray with 2 enormous animals steaming at the shoulder, a hansom, an omnibus with its roof seats empty because nobody sits up top in January. Where there are that many horses, there is what horses leave, and where that mixes with slush, there is a wet grey-brown substance about 2 inches deep from curb to curb that will go up the back of a skirt in one careless step, which is why there is a boy at the corner with a broom. He sweeps the crossing. He has swept it since 8, and he will sweep it until dark, clearing a path across the road for anyone who wants one. And he holds his hand out afterwards, and you give him a halfpenny when you have one because he is about 11 and his boots are worse than yours. That is his whole living. It is the sort of work that exists because a city has more filth than it can manage and more children than it can employ. Other people are out in it selling things. Winter has its own street trades. There is a man with a chestnut brazier at the top of the street, a black drum of a thing on legs with a coal fire in it, and the nuts split and blistering on the top, and the smell of it reaches further than anything else on the road. A penny buys a paper twist of them, hot enough to hurt, and they will warm 2 hands the whole way home. There is the muffin man later, with the tray on his head and the bell, and the watercress woman who is out earlier than anyone. There is a coffee stall at the junction, a stall with a boiler and a canvas roof doing steady business in coffee at a halfpenny and thick bread and butter, and standing round it are cabmen and porters and a policeman with his cape wet through. And there is the other clock you keep in your head, which is the evening one. The stalls in the market off the high road run until 9 or 10 on a Saturday, and by the last hour when the naphtha lamps are hissing and flaring and the traders are looking at what is left on the boards, prices come down and keep coming down, because meat and fish unsold on Saturday night are worth nothing at all on Monday morning. A woman who can wait until 9:30 can buy for half. A great many women wait. You do not always, but you know. The wind has got up along the length of the road, and it comes at your face under the veil, wet rather than sharp, and the basket has become heavy in the way baskets do, which is all at once and near the end. By the time you reach your own door, your fingers have stopped being able to do fine work. The latch is a simple thing, a thumb press and a lift, and you stand on your own step with the basket on your hip and cannot make your hand close on it properly. And you have to put the basket down on the wet step and press both palms together and blow into them first. Then it lifts and the warm comes out at you from the passage, and you get yourself and the mutton and the bones and the blue paper cones inside and shut the fog out behind you. The basket goes onto the kitchen table, and the kitchen takes you back the way a warm room takes anyone in from a January street, which is to say, all at once and then not at all, because within a minute or two your face has stopped burning and you have forgotten to be grateful. Before you unpack anything, you go down the passage to the front of the house, because the mutton wants a cool place until evening, and the front parlour is the coolest room you have. You open the door, and the cold comes out to meet you like the cold of a cellar. The parlour has not had a fire in it since Sunday afternoon. That is 3 days. A room in a terraced house holds a little heat from its neighbours through the party walls, and the passage lends it a breath now and then. But 3 days without a grate lit in the middle of January means the room has settled to something only a few degrees above the street. There is a bloom of damp on the inside of the window glass, and along the bottom of the sash, the condensation has run down and gathered and frozen into a thin grey line. The horsehair sofa is cold to touch through your sleeve. The piano lid, if you were to lift it, would be cold enough to sting. You put the meat on the marble-topped washstand under the window, cover it with a cloth, and come out and shut the door behind you quickly, the way you always shut it, because the room is not a room in winter. It is a cupboard the size of a room. It holds the good furniture and the best tea things and the photographs and the aspidistra, and it is opened for visitors and for Sunday and for anything that could be called an occasion, and the rest of the time it is a store for cold. This is worth slowing down for, because the parlour tells you almost everything about how warmth was arranged in a city of 5.5 million people. Warmth in the 1890s was not a system. There was no heating in the sense you would recognise. There was only fire in individual grates, each of which had to be laid and lit and fed and cleared by hand, and each of which consumed fuel that had to be bought and carried and stored. That means warmth was not something a house had. It was something a house purchased hour by hour, room by room, all winter, and the number of rooms it could afford to purchase it in was the plainest single measure of what the household was worth. At the bottom of that measure is the single room. A family in one room in a court off the Gray's Inn Road, or in Somerstown, or down towards the river, has one grate, and that grate is the whole of the household's warmth. Cooking, light in the evening and drying. It is not lit all day. Coal in small quantities is dear in a way that is almost cruel. Bought by the hundredweight from a merchant's cart, it comes to something near 1 shilling and 4pence, but bought as the poorest have to buy it, in a bucket or a bag or in pennyworths from a chandler's shop because there is no cellar and no money to fill one. The same coal works out at nearly half again as much. The less you can afford, the more each shovelful costs you. That is not a quirk. That is simply how buying in small amounts has always worked, and it fell hardest, exactly where it could least be borne. So in that single room, the fire is lit for the cooking and kept small, and the children are put near it, and the adults are not. And in the coldest weeks, the family goes to bed early because bed is warmer than the room and requires nothing. Bed in a cold house is a fuel-saving device. It always was. Move a little way up. Your own house. 6 rooms counting the scullery, 2 grates in regular use, the kitchen range which is lit from before 6 in the morning until it is banked at 10 at night, and the sitting room grate which is lit in the afternoon when the light goes. The bedrooms have grates. Those grates are laid, swept, black-leaded and not used. A bedroom fire in your house means somebody is ill, and everybody in the house understands that, so that the sound of a scuttle going upstairs in the evening carries a meaning entirely separate from warmth. Now move up again and keep moving because the distance is further than people generally think. In a house in the Bayswater end of things, a professional man's house with 3 servants, the family bedrooms have fires laid and lit in the morning. In a large house in Belgravia or Mayfair with a proper staff, the housemaids are up at 5:30 and their first work is grates, in sequence, room after room, so that when the family comes down or wakes, Every room they might enter is already warm, and every room has been warm for an hour before it was needed. That is the whole point. The warmth arrives before the person does. Nobody in that house ever walks into a cold room all winter, and because nobody ever does, nobody in that house particularly thinks about warmth at all. Consider what that requires. A housemaid in such a house clears out perhaps 8 or 10 grates a day, carries the ash down, carries coal up, lays paper and wood and coal in each, lights them, and returns through the day to feed them. A large house in a hard winter can burn something upwards of 5 or 6 tons of coal in a quarter, which at merchants' prices is a considerable sum, but is a small fraction of that household's income, and the labour that turns it into warmth is bought at about £16 or £18 a year, all found per housemaid. That is the machinery. Comfort at the top of the scale is manufactured out of coal and out of the hands of women who are paid very little to be up in the dark, handling it. And there is a detail in that arrangement which is easy to miss and which says the whole thing at once. The housemaid who lights every fire in the house sleeps in a room with no fire at all. The servant's bedroom in a London house is in the attic, immediately under the slates. It has a small window, often a skylight, frequently one that does not shut properly. There is no grate, or there is a grate that has been boarded up, or there is a grate that is never lit because coal carried up 4 flights for a servant is not an expense any household of the period thought it was buying. Under slates, with the cold coming through the roof and no heat rising from below because the floors between have their doors shut, an attic room in January sits at very nearly the outside temperature. A jug of water in such a room freezes on an ordinary night. This is not a scandal that anyone reported. It is simply what the top of the house was, and every household in London that had a servant sleeping in it, including, in a small way, yours. Your own girl sleeps in the back room on the half landing, which is a slightly better arrangement only because your house is small enough not to have a proper attic. She goes up with a candle and a stone bottle filled from the kettle, and she takes her stockings to bed with her under the covers so they will not be stiff in the morning. You gave her an extra blanket in November. You are aware, in the way one is aware of things one does not intend to change, that this is not the same as a fire. Which brings you to the other place warmth lived, which was outside the house entirely. There is a considerable amount of London in winter that exists because people need somewhere warm to be that costs nothing or almost nothing. The free public library reading room is the plainest example. Rows of men, mostly, some of them reading the newspapers on their sloped stands with real attention, and some of them reading them for as long as they can stretch it, out of the weather, in a room that is properly heated and lit, and where nobody may ask them to leave so long as they are quiet and have a newspaper in front of them. The libraries knew perfectly well why the reading rooms were full in January and empty in June. The churches are open and are warm on Sunday and cold on Tuesday. The mission halls run tea and a fire and a talk in that order of appeal, and everyone involved understood the order. The pub is warm all day, deliberately, with a fire in the public bar and sawdust down and the door swinging, and a man may sit there a long while on the price of half a pint, and a great deal of the pub's business in winter is exactly that. The shops are warm, and the big drapery stores at the West End have found that a warm interior and something to look at will hold a person for an hour, which is a discovery they are in the middle of making and will not stop making for a century. The omnibus is warm only in the sense that a straw-floored box with other people in it is warmer than the top deck, where the fare is a penny less and the wind is everything. And then there are the doorways and the railings over the bakehouse gratings on the pavement where the warm air comes up all night, and people who have nowhere at all stand on them. You have walked past those gratings. Everybody has. You come back along your own passage and the parlour door is shut behind you and the kitchen door is ahead, and the difference between the two sides of that passage is about 10 degrees and 1 shilling and 4pence a hundredweight. You will light the parlour fire on Sunday. You would light it tonight if your husband's brother called, or if the woman from the end house came in about the club money, and you would light it half an hour before they arrived, so the room would have lost its worst chill by the time they were sitting in it, and you would be aware while you were laying it of exactly what that fire was for, which is not warmth. It is the appearance of a household that can be warm in more than one room. That is what the parlour is. It is a room kept cold all week in order to be warm at the right moment in front of the right person. You know to the shilling what that costs. You could sit down at this table with a pencil and tell anyone the figure, what a Sunday fire in the front room takes out of the week, what it saves not to light it Monday to Saturday, what the difference comes to across a quarter, and what else that money would have been. You have made the calculation so many times that it is no longer a calculation. It is a thing you simply know, the way you know the depth of the stair, and it goes on running underneath the whole of the day without anyone, including you, thinking to call it work. The children come back at 12:30, all 3 of them at once, the door banging against the umbrella stand because the middle one never learned to hold it. They bring the cold in with them in their coats, a smell of wet wool and chalk dust and the outside air, and they go straight down the passage past the shut parlour door without looking at it, because they know as well as you do that there is nothing in there in January but furniture. The kitchen is where they eat. The kitchen is where everyone eats and has since the first week of November, and will until the clocks change and the evenings come back. In summer, you might set the table in the back room and open the window onto the yard. In January, the whole household compresses itself into one room roughly 12 feet by 14, with the range along one wall throwing its heat about 4 feet into the middle of it. And everything the family does between waking and sleeping happens inside that 4 feet. They sit down still wearing their coats. You do not tell them to take them off. The coats will be steaming faintly by the time the plates are cleared, and that is the point. Today it is stew, which it is on most Tuesdays, because Sunday's joint was small, and what came off the bone on Monday went into the pot with an onion and a carrot and a turnip and a handful of pearl barley, and it has been sitting at the back of the range since 9:30, going slowly softer. There is a sweat pudding as well, boiled in a cloth, currants in it, and it has been in the pot beside the stew for 2 hours and a half. Let me stop here on the range itself, because there is a piece of skill in this room that has almost entirely escaped the historical record, and it belongs to you. There is no dial on that range. There is no thermometer in the oven. There is no gauge of any kind anywhere on the apparatus you are cooking on. What there is instead is a firebox, a damper, a flue, a hot plate directly over the fire, a second hot plate further along that runs cooler, a trivet, a hob, an oven on one side, and a boiler on the other for hot water. Every one of those things responds to what the fire is doing, and the fire is doing something different every 20 minutes, and it is your business to know what. You judge the oven by putting your hand inside it and counting. If you can hold your hand in the middle of that oven for a slow count of about 20, it is cool enough for a milk pudding or for drying out a batch of rusks. If you can manage roughly 10, you can bake a plain cake in it. If you can only stand it for a count of 3 or 4 before you pull your hand out, that is a bread oven, and it is right for pastry too, though pastry wants to go in and come out quickly. You learned this from your mother, who learned it from hers, and nobody wrote it down for you because it was not the sort of thing that got written down. You judge the fire by colour. A fire with dark patches on it and smoke coming off is a fire that has just been fed and is not yet giving out heat, and you do not put a pan on it expecting anything to happen. A fire that has gone clear and red all through, no flame, no smoke, is at its best, and that is when the flat iron goes on, or the frying is done. A fire that has gone pale and grey at the edges and is starting to fall in on itself is a fire with maybe 40 minutes left in it before it needs raking and feeding. You can tell all of this from the doorway, with a basket in your hand, without stopping, and you manage all of it at once. The stew wants to sit where it will not quite boil, which is the cool end of the hot plate, and it wants moving inward if the fire drops. The pudding wants a steady rolling boil under it and topping up with water from the kettle so the pot does not go dry. The kettle itself wants filling from the boiler and putting back. The oven, today, has a dish of potatoes in it because the oven is hot anyway, and it would be a waste not to use it. 4 different things wanting 4 different temperatures off one fire, and you shift them about across that iron top like a woman moving pieces on a board. And the shifting is continuous, and nobody in this house has ever remarked on it, including you. That is the thing to hold on to. A modern kitchen hands you a number, and you set it. This kitchen hands you nothing, and you supply the number out of your own hands and eyes, and the meal arrives on the table at the same hour every day, regardless. The pudding is worth a word of its own because it is the single most efficient object in an English winter. Suet, flour, a little sugar, water, currants if there are currants, and none if there are not. That is the whole of it. Suet costs a few pence a pound from the butcher and often comes free if you are a steady customer because it is the hard fat from around the kidneys and he has more of it than he can sell. Flour is cheap and getting cheaper year by year as the American and Canadian grain comes in. You chop the suet fine with a little flour to stop it clinging, mix it dry, bring it together with water, roll it in a floured cloth, tie the ends, and drop it into water that is already boiling. Then it takes care of itself for 2 hours in the same pot that is heating anyway. What comes out is heavy, hot, sweet enough to be a treat, and it fills 3 children up in a way that bread and butter will not. It does the one job that matters most in a cold house, which is putting something inside a body that will still be burning 3 hours later when that body is sitting in an unheated schoolroom. A pudding of that kind costs you perhaps 4p to make and feeds 5 people, and it is the reason the English winter diet looks so strange written down and made such complete sense at the time. Boiled pudding, roly-poly, spotted dick, plain sweet crust over the top of the stew itself so the meat goes further. It is not a national eccentricity, it is arithmetic. The stew is the same arithmetic in another shape. The Sunday joint was small, but the bone went into the pot, and the marrow came out of it, and the barley swelled and thickened, and a piece of meat that would have made one modest meal for 2 adults has made a Sunday dinner, a Monday supper, and today's stew for 5, with something left in the bottom of the pot for tomorrow. Now think back to the coal. That fire has been alight since 20 to 6 this morning. It has been fed 3 times. It has boiled the kettle for the family's tea, heated the washing water, kept the air going in the corner with yesterday's shirts on it, run the boiler at the side so there is hot water for the plates afterwards, held the stew at a simmer for 3 hours, boiled the pudding for 2.5, and roasted a dish of potatoes in the oven, and it will go on doing things until about 11 tonight. Between waking and the moment the plates go on the table, you have burned somewhere around 1/4 of 100 weight. Call it 28 pounds of coal. Call it 4p. 4p for warmth, hot water, dry clothes, and dinner for 5, all of it out of the same box of fire in the same wall, which is exactly why the range is never allowed to go out, and why letting it out would be regarded in this house as something close to a moral failure. Nothing about that meal is separate from anything else. The pudding is cheap because the fire was going to be lit anyway. The potatoes went in the oven because the oven was hot for no additional cost. The plates are washed in water that heated itself in the boiler while the stew cooked. Every part of the arrangement leans on every other part, and the whole of it is held in your head at once. And it is held there so continuously that you would find it difficult to explain if anyone asked. They eat quickly. Children always do, and these have to be back through the school gate by 1:30. The eldest wants a second helping of pudding and gets it because there is enough. The youngest has been coughing since Sunday and eats about half of what is on the plate, and you notice that, and you say nothing about it yet, and you put the rest aside on the hob under a saucer. Then the coats are buttoned and the mufflers go round, and you catch the middle one at the door and pull his cap down over his ears properly because he will not do it himself. And there is a moment at the open front door where all the heat of the last hour goes straight out into the street and you can see it go. The door shuts, the passage is quiet, the house holds its 2 temperatures again. You do not sit down. There is a habit that women of your household and your income share almost universally, and it is this. You drink your tea standing, you pour it, you lean your back against the edge of the dresser where you can feel the warmth off the range on your left side, and you drink it looking at the middle distance, and it takes perhaps 4 minutes. The kitchen makes its small noises. The air creaks once as something on it shifts its weight. The kettle, refilled and back on, begins the very early sound it makes long before it is anywhere near boiling. Outside the window, the yard is a grey square with the fog sitting in it, and the wall at the far end has gone soft and indistinct, and it is not yet 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You finish the tea, you set the cup down. There are 5 plates, a pot, a pudding cloth, and a dish to be dealt with, and the light is already beginning to think about going. The washing up takes 20 minutes, and by the time the last dish is set on its edge to drain, something has happened to the window. It has not gone dark, it has gone thin. The grey square of the yard, which at noon had a kind of flat brightness to it, has lost whatever was behind that brightness, and the wall at the end of the yard is now only a suggestion of a wall. This is the middle of the afternoon in January in a city under fog, and the difference between full daylight and no daylight at all is not a line you cross. It is a slow leaking away that starts around 1 o'clock and is finished by 4, so you move your chair. This is one of the small physical habits that would tell an observer more about your life than almost anything you could say aloud. The chair lives beside the range where it is warm. In the afternoon, you carry it to the window and set it at an angle, half turned, so that the light falls over your left shoulder and down onto your lap, and you sit there with your back to the fire and your hands in the last of the daylight, and you accept the trade. Warm hands and no light, or cold shoulders and enough light to sew by. You choose the light because the work in your lap cannot be done without it, and because you can put your feet nearer the fender and get some of it back that way. Here is something worth slowing down for, because it explains the shape of the entire day. You live in the most thoroughly lit city that has ever existed. Gas has been in London streets since before your mother was born. There are electric arc lamps on the embankment and along Northumberland Avenue, and there is a gas mantle in this very kitchen on a bracket beside the chimney breast, and you could stand up right now and light it, and yet you have arranged your whole afternoon around a window. The reason is money, and the reason is also quality of light. Gas in a house like yours comes on a quarterly bill from the local company, and for a small terraced house with 2 or 3 burners in regular use, you are looking at something in the region of 10 to 15 shillings a quarter, depending on how careful you are. That is not ruinous, but it is not nothing either. When your husband brings home a little under £3 a week, and every shilling has already been spoken for by the coal merchant, the rent book, and the grocer's account. A shilling saved on gas across a winter quarter is a pair of boots resoled. The other reason is that the light itself is not very good. The old fishtail and batswing burners gave a yellow, unsteady flame that moved when a door opened. The improvement in your kitchen, and it is a genuine improvement, is the incandescent mantle, invented by Karl Auer von Welsbach in the middle of the 1880s and spreading through ordinary London houses through the following decade. A mantle is a little cage of fabric soaked in metallic salts, fitted over the flame, and when it heats, it glows white rather than yellow, and it gives several times the light for the same gas. It is also unbelievably fragile. Touch it once with the wrong end of a match and it collapses into powder, and you have to buy another, and they cost a few pence each, and you would rather not. Upstairs, there is no gas at all. The bedrooms are lit by a paraffin lamp carried up and set on the chest of drawers, and by candles on the stairs, and the paraffin comes in a can from the oil shop and smells of itself for an hour after it is put out. The stairs and the passage get candles because a candle can be carried, and a lamp is a nuisance and a risk, all of which is to say that light in this house exists in tiers. Daylight is free and best. The mantle in the kitchen is good and costs money. The paraffin lamp is adequate and smells, candles are cheap and give you about enough to find a door handle by. And the work you are about to do requires the top tier, so you sit in the window at 2:30 and you take what is left of it. What is in your lap is a stocking. It is a child's stocking, black wool, hand-knitted, and the heel has gone through in the way heels go through, which is a thinning first, and then a hole in the middle of the thinning. You have a darning mushroom, which is a wooden thing shaped like its name, and you push it up inside the stocking so the worn place is stretched over the curve of it. Then you lay threads across the hole in one direction, close together, anchored well out into the sound wool on either side, because the sound wool is not really sound. It is simply not a hole yet. Then you weave threads across those at right angles, over and under, and you build a small patch of new fabric where the old fabric has gone. A good darn takes perhaps 15 or 20 minutes. There are 3 children in this house, and each child has several pairs of stockings, and stockings are worn every day of the winter, and walked on inside boots that are themselves not perfect, and so this is not a task that ever finishes. It is a task that sits in a basket beside your chair and rises and falls like water. The basket also holds shirts. A man who works in a railway office wears a clean collar. He does not necessarily wear a clean shirt every day, but the collar must be white and it must be stiff, because the collar is the part of him that the chief clerk sees. Collars in a household like yours are separate items, buttoned on, so that 3 or 4 collars can be laundered without laundering 3 or 4 shirts. And when a collar frays at the fold, which it does, you do not throw it away. You unpick it, turn it, and sew it back on with the worn edge inside. The same is done with cuffs. The same, eventually, is done with the shirt itself. When the collar band has been turned twice and the elbows have gone, and the whole thing is cut down into a shirt for the eldest boy, and what is left of that becomes cleaning cloths, and then, at the very end of its life, goes into the rag bag and is sold to the rag man for a few pence a pound. Nothing in this house is thrown away. Things are moved down. The eldest boy's coat, which was bought new 2 winters ago and cost 11 shillings and 6pence, has already been let out at the shoulders once, and had the sleeves lengthened with a false cuff of the same cloth taken from the hem. It will go to the middle one in the spring, and by then you will have unpicked the whole garment, turned every panel so the unfaded side of the cloth faces out, and put it back together, and it will look, from the far side of a fogged street, like a coat that was made this year. A new child's winter coat ready-made from a shop would be somewhere between 8 and 15 shillings, depending on the cloth. Turning the old one costs you nothing but 2 evenings and the thread. Here is a thing that ought to be said plainly. What you are doing in that chair is not a hobby, and it is not thrift in the sense of a virtuous small economy. It is the difference between a family that looks respectable and a family that does not. Respectability, at your income, is not a state you possess. It is a thing you manufacture continuously with your hands, out of turned collars and darned heels and coats unpicked and reassembled, and if you stopped doing it for 4 months, the whole household would visibly slide, and everybody in the street would see it slide, and it would be understood as a moral failing rather than as the arithmetic it actually is. There is a machine that could help. Sewing machines have been in British homes for 40 years by now. Isaac Singer's company and its competitors sold them hard through the second half of the century, and by the 1890s, a domestic hand machine, the kind that sits on the table and is turned with a wheel by your right hand while your left feeds the cloth, could be had for somewhere between £3 and £6. A treadle machine on its own iron stand, which frees both your hands, costs more. £6 is a great deal of money in a house with £140 a year coming in. It is nearly 3 weeks of your husband's entire wage before rent, coal or food. which is precisely why the manufacturers invented the other thing they are famous for, which is not a machine at all, but a payment scheme. You could have a machine on hire purchase for something like 2 shillings and 6pence a week, sometimes less, collected by a man who came to the door and marked your card. Pay for 2 years and the machine is yours. Miss enough payments and the man comes and takes it back, and everything you have already paid is gone. Whether a house like this one has a machine is genuinely uncertain. Many did not, and stayed with the needle, and made the calculation that 2 and 6 a week for 2 years was 2 and 6 a week they could not reliably promise. And it is worth being honest about what a machine changes and what it does not. A machine makes long seams fast. It will run up a shift, a petticoat, a plain skirt, a set of pillowcases in a fraction of the time. It does almost nothing for darning a heel, turning a collar, patching a knee, or letting down a hem, because all of those are shaping work done in small, awkward places, and all of those are the bulk of what is in your basket. The machine speeds the making, it cannot touch the mending, and in a house at your income, you do far more mending than making, so the needle keeps moving in the window, and the window keeps getting worse. By 10 to 3, you are holding the work closer to your face than you were half an hour ago. By 3, you are angling the stocking to catch what light there is, and you have made a stitch you are not satisfied with, and you have unpicked it. And you know perfectly well what that means. You put the darning mushroom down on the chair seat. You cross to the chimney breast, take a match from the box on the shelf, strike it, and hold it up under the mantel while your other hand turns the tap. There is the small sound the gas makes, not quite a hiss, more like a held breath. And then the mantle takes and goes from nothing to a hard white glow in about a second and a half, and the whole kitchen changes colour. Everything yellows slightly. The whitewashed wall above the range goes cream. The brown teapot goes warmer. The window, which a moment ago was the source of all the light in the room, becomes a black rectangle with your own reflection standing in the middle of it, and you can no longer see the yard at all, or the wall, or the fog. It is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You carry your chair back to the fire, because there is no longer any reason to sit by the window, and you settle in the warm with the basket at your feet and the light coming down over your shoulder from the bracket, and you pick up the stocking where you left it. The coughing has been going on since Sunday. It is your youngest, the one who is 5, and it is not a frightening cough. It is the ordinary kind, the kind that comes up dry in the morning and loosens by evening, the kind that every household in this street is hearing in one room or another this week. You have kept the child home from school for 2 days now, in the chair nearest the range with a shawl folded twice around the shoulders and a footstool under both feet, because you know that the floor is colder than the air and the air is colder than the fire, and a child who sits with their boots on the flagstones will still be cold no matter how close the grate is. You have arranged the chair so the draught from the scullery passage does not reach it. That took you about 40 seconds of thought on Sunday afternoon, and you have not thought about it since, and it is the sort of decision that no one in the house will ever notice you having made. Now, at a little after 3, with the gas lit and the stocking finished, you set the basket aside and go to see about a poultice. Here is something worth understanding about a household like yours in the winter of 1897. Almost all of the medical care that happens in this country happens in kitchens like this one, performed by women like you, without training, without payment, and without any record surviving that it happened at all. The materials are already in the house. Linseed meal in a paper packet in the dresser, bought by the pound at the oil and colour shop for a few pence, and kept for exactly this: a tin of camphorated oil, a bottle of syrup of squills, or failing that, honey and lemon and hot water, which is what you will mostly use because it costs less and the child will actually swallow it. Glycerin. Friar's balsam, if you have it, for the bowl. A packet of mustard for a mustard bath if the cough moves down into the chest, which you do not think it will. The poultice itself is a matter of a few minutes. You scald the meal with boiling water in a basin and work it with a spoon until it is a thick paste, thick enough to hold its shape. and you spread it on a square of old flannel about 1/4 of an inch deep and fold the edges over so nothing can escape. You test it against the inside of your own wrist before it goes near the child every single time without being told to, because the whole point of the thing is heat, and the whole risk of the thing is heat. Then it goes on the chest under the nightgown with another flannel over the top to keep it warm, and it stays there until it cools, and then it comes off, and the skin underneath is dried, and the child is buttoned up again. You have done this perhaps 200 times in 11 years of motherhood. You learned it from your own mother in a kitchen in Hackney when you were 9 years old and holding the basin. Then there is the bowl. Boiling water, a spoonful of balsam or a few drops of eucalyptus, a towel over the head, and the child bent over it for as long as they can be persuaded to stay, which at 5 years old is roughly 90 seconds at a time. The kitchen fills with the smell of it, and camphor and eucalyptus and wet flannel layered over the coal and the damp wool on the era, and that particular combination is what January smells like in about half the houses in London, and everyone who grew up in this century will recognize it instantly for the rest of their lives. Now, the question of the doctor. A doctor can be got. This is not a village. There are 3 within 10 minutes' walk, with brass plates and surgery hours painted on the door. A house call in a district like this costs somewhere between 2 shillings and 6pence and 5 shillings, depending on the man and the hour, and more if he comes at night. A consultation at his surgery is cheaper, perhaps 1 shilling or 18 pence, with the medicine made up on the spot and charged for on top. Set that against the household. Your husband brings home a little under £3 a week. A 5 shilling call is most of a day of his working life. It is more than the whole week's coal in a mild spell. It is a pair of boys' boots, and it buys for a common winter cough in a child who is eating and sleeping and complaining about being kept indoors. Almost certainly nothing you are not already doing. So you do not send for him, not today, and probably not this week. And this is not neglect, and it is not ignorance, and it is worth being precise about that, because the temptation from a distance is to read every unsent-for doctor as a failure. What it actually is triage, performed daily by a woman with a fairly accurate working model of which symptoms resolve on their own and which do not. You know the signs that would change your mind. Breathing that goes fast and shallow, a child who will not drink, a rash, a cough that starts to whoop, heat in the skin that does not come down by evening. If any of those arrived, you would have your shawl on and be out of the door inside a minute, and the money would be found, and it would come out of the boot fund or the Christmas club or wherever it had to come from, and no one would argue about it afterwards. Below that line, you manage it yourself, and so does every other woman in the street. And between you there is an enormous accumulated body of practical knowledge that has never been written down anywhere except in cheap household manuals that mostly copied it out of each other. For the things in between, there are the halfway options. The parish dispensary, where a subscriber's ticket gets you seen and a bottle of medicine for a few pence. The Provident dispensary, where a household pays a penny or 2 a week in and draws medical attendance out, which is insurance in everything but name. The outpatient department of the voluntary hospital, where you can queue on a bench for the better part of a morning and be seen for nothing at all, if you can spare a morning, which is a real question in a house where the range must be watched. And the chemist, who is the first port of call for a great many people and who will listen to a description across the counter and recommend something for 2pence, and who is, for practical purposes, the family doctor of half the working population of the city. You go to the chemist perhaps 6 times a winter. You have gone to the dispensary twice in your married life. You have had a doctor in this house 4 times in 11 years, and you could name every one of those occasions without pausing. While the poultice is cooling, there is a knock at the back door, and it is the woman from 3 houses down. She has come about nothing in particular, which is to say she has come because she heard from the woman next door to her that your youngest was coughing, and she has brought half a lemon, and she stays for 6 or 7 minutes with the door mostly closed behind her and the cold coming in around her boots. The lemon is worth about a penny. That is not the point of the lemon. This is the part of a winter household that does not appear in any budget, and it is doing an enormous amount of work. The street runs on it. Sugar borrowed on a Thursday and returned on a Saturday. A neighbour's eldest girl sent round to sit with a child for 2 hours so that a mother can go to the market with both hands free. A pot of something sent in when a family is short. Bread taken in from the baker's boy for a house where nobody is home. Someone's husband looking at your kitchen tap for the price of a cup of tea because he is handy and you are not. None of it is charity, and it would offend everyone involved to describe it as charity. It is understood as reciprocal, and it is tracked with real accuracy on both sides, and a woman who takes without ever giving back will find within about a season that the borrowing has quietly stopped being offered to her. It is also, functionally, the only insurance most of these households have against the ordinary bad weeks. There is no sick pay. There is a burial club, and there may be a friendly society for the husband's illness, but there is nothing at all for the mother who cannot get out of bed on a Tuesday, and what stands in that gap is 4 or 5 women within 100 yards who will notice she has not come out for the milk. You have been on both ends of it. 2 winters ago, when you were laid up for 11 days, the woman standing in your doorway now took your middle child into her own kitchen every afternoon and fed him and sent him back at 6 and never mentioned it afterwards, and would be embarrassed if you mentioned it now. So she asks after the cough, and you say it is loosening, and she says her sister's boy had the same 3 weeks ago, and it took a fortnight and there was nothing in it. And you both find that genuinely reassuring, because that is what a diagnosis looks like at this level. And she says something about the fog, and you agree about the fog, and she goes, and the door shuts, and the kitchen is warm again in about a minute and a half. Then you go back to the chair by the range. The poultice comes off. The skin underneath is pink and dry and warm. The child submits to the towel and the bowl for another minute and a half, protesting the whole time, and comes up flushed with damp hair stuck to the forehead, and the room smells of camphor so strongly that you will still be able to smell it on the blanket in 3 days. You wrap the shawl round again, you put the kettle back on the hob because it has gone off the boil, and you sit down for the length of time it takes to drink half a cup of tea, which is about as long as anything sits down in this house between 5 in the morning and 9 at night. By 5:30 it has been dark for 2 hours, and it has been dark in a way that January in London manages better than any other month. Not the clean dark of a country night where you can see the shape of a hedge against the sky. This dark comes down through fog, so it has no depth to it at all. The window over the scullery sink shows you nothing but a faint smear of yellow where the street lamp at the corner is doing its best, and the reflection of your own kitchen laid over the top of it, which is the only view you will have from that window until March. The children come in at 5:20, both of them stamping, and the cold arrives with them the way it always does, a whole roomful of outside air pushed in ahead of 2 small bodies and taking 4 or 5 minutes to warm back up. Caps off, scarves off, and hung, not dropped, because you have said it enough times that it has finally taken. Boots off at the door because of what the pavement is like, and you have the newspaper ready. The table gets laid for tea. Bread and butter cut thin on the plate that is only used for bread. A dish of watercress bought that morning for a penny from a girl who had walked it in from the market with her hands blue round the bunch. Watercress is one of the few green things you can put on a table in the middle of January without it costing something you would notice, and it does something for a meal that nothing else in the house can do at this time of year. There is a bloater as well, one split and warmed at the side of the range, and it will be shared out, and the smell of it is already in the passage and will be in the passage tomorrow. That is tea. bread and butter, watercress, a share of a smoked herring, and as much tea as anyone wants, which in this house is quite a lot because tea is warm and it is the cheapest warm thing you can put inside a person. Your husband comes in at 6:15. You hear the gate first, then the boots on the step, then the particular sound of a man deciding whether he can shake enough water off an umbrella to bring it inside. He brings the fog in with him in the most literal way. It is in the wool of his overcoat, hanging there in a fine grey film that you can see when he stands near the lamp, and it is on his hat, and it has got down inside his collar the way it does. He smells of it. Everyone smells of it in January. Smoke and river and something faintly metallic, and it does not come out of a coat in one evening. The overcoat goes on the hook nearest the range, not the hook by the door, because a coat left by the door will still be damp at 7 in the morning, and a man cannot go to an office in a damp coat 2 days running. His boots come off and you take them, and they are wet through, properly through. The leather dark all the way up past the welt, and you push newspaper into them and set them on the fender at an angle. That is not a small piece of housekeeping. A pair of a man's boots costs somewhere between 9 and 12 shillings depending on where you buy them and how honest the shop is, and resoling costs about 2 shillings, and a pair that is dried too fast against a hot grate will crack across the toe and be finished in a season. So you dry them slowly, on the fender, at a distance, turned twice before you go to bed. Everyone in this street knows how to dry a boot. Nobody has ever been paid a farthing for knowing it. He has walked home. Most nights he walks home. This is worth a moment because the idea of a Victorian city as a place of constant carriages is one of those pictures that survives because carriages were the part that got drawn. Your husband works in a railway company office off the Euston Road, which is a walk of a little under 3 miles, and he does it twice a day, 6 days a week, and in January he does both ends of it in the dark. There are alternatives. There is the horse omnibus, which runs the main roads and costs a penny or 2p for a short stage and 6p or so for a longer one, and which in fog runs late and sometimes does not run at all because a driver cannot see his own horses' heads. There is the Underground Railway, which by this decade has been carrying people beneath these streets for more than 30 years, steam-worked and sulphurous. And there is the new electric line running deep under the city that opened only in the last year or two, and which people are still slightly amazed by. There are the trams, though not through the central district, where they are not allowed. And there is the beginning of the electric tram out in the suburbs, which people talk about the way they talk about anything that looks like the future. All of these cost money. A penny each way, 6 days a week, is a shilling a week, which is more than 50 shillings a year, which is a decent winter coat. So he walks. A great many men in a great many streets in this city walk, and the reason they walk is arithmetic, and the walk takes 50 minutes at a good pace, and in fog it takes an hour and 10, because you cannot go at a good pace when you are following a curb by feel. He does not complain about it particularly. It is simply what the day has at each end of it, the way the range has to be lit at each end of it. So he sits and he eats, and the room does the thing it does every evening between 6 and 7, which is fill up with the steam of drying wool. This is the smell of a working household in a London winter, and there is no getting away from it. There is his overcoat by the range. There are 2 children's coats on the area above, and 2 pairs of stockings and a scarf that went into a puddle on the way home from school. There are the boots on the fender. There is still yesterday's wash, the last stubborn items of it, hanging on the horse in the corner because 2 days of drying was optimistic in this weather, and it is going to be 3. And there is the kettle, and the pot, and the general damp of 5 people breathing in a room with the window shut and the door shut and a fire going. The ceiling above the range shows it. Every winter has added a little more to the stain up there, a soft brown bloom in the plaster spreading out from the chimney breast, and it will be washed down in the spring and it will not come off, and next winter it will be a shade darker. That mark is a record of about 9 years of evenings exactly like this one. The children are dry by 7. They complain about the wet stockings being taken away, and they complain about the dry ones going on, and one of them is told twice to move away from the fender because the shins go blotchy and red if you sit that close, and it makes them itch afterwards. The little one, the one who has been coughing since Sunday, is allowed the chair nearest the warm and is entirely aware of the advantage this represents and would like to keep the cough for another week. Your husband asks about the day, not in detail. He asks whether the coal came because the merchant said Tuesday, and you tell him the cellar hatch was opened at 11 and the man was decent about the fog and did not short you. He asks about the cough and you say it is loosening. You tell him what the butcher wanted for a neck of mutton this week, and he makes the noise that men make about prices, and then he tells you a small piece of office news that is only interesting because it is the outside world, and you take it and turn it over because it is the only outside world you have had today apart from a doorway conversation and a walk to the shops. And tonight, the servant is out. She has been in the scullery washing the tea things, and at 7:30 she comes through with her hat on and her one good jacket, and you say what time, and she says 10, and you say 10, and that is the whole negotiation because it is the same every week. This is her evening. She has one a week and one Sunday afternoon a month, which is what a general servant at £12 a year and board is given in a house like this, and it is neither generous nor unusual. She will go to her sister's 3 streets over, and the two of them will sit in somebody else's warm kitchen for 2 hours and talk about the households they are in, and there is no reason on earth to think they will be flattering about them. The door goes, the gate goes, and here is the odd effect of it, which anyone who has run a house at this level knows. The kitchen is fuller now than it has been all day. The whole household is in one room, because there is one fire that has been going since 5:30 in the morning, and there is no sense in lighting a second one at 8 o'clock at night. 5 people, 1 range, 1 lamp on the table, 1 cat that came with the house and has never been given a formal position. The passage outside this door is cold. The stairs are cold. The parlour, 6 feet away through a closed door, is as cold as the yard. But in here, the plates are being stacked, and the youngest is leaning on your knee half asleep and pretending not to be, and your husband has his stockinged feet on the fender at the exact angle you have told him not to, and the boots are steaming quietly beside them, and the coat is steaming above them, and the air overhead is dripping very occasionally onto the hearth with a small hiss. It is the loudest and the warmest hour in the house. It is also the only hour in the day when everybody in it is in the same room at the same time, awake, doing nothing in particular. That is not an accident, and it is not sentiment either. It is fuel, 1 fire, 1 room, and the whole family arranged around it because the alternative costs money. The closeness of a family in a January evening in this city was manufactured every day by the price of coal. The table is cleared by 7:20, and what happens next is the part of the day that no household account book records because nothing in it is bought or sold. The lamp comes into the middle of the table, not the gas, which is still hissing away on its bracket by the door and throwing a hard, flat yellow that is fine for washing up in and useless for anything requiring the eyes. The paraffin lamp with the glass chimney you cleaned this morning with newspaper gets set on the table and turned up, and it makes a circle of workable light about 3 feet across. Everything of consequence for the next hour and a half will happen inside that circle. Outside it the room goes brown and soft, and the fire does the rest. The fire is banked now, or half-banked, not sealed down for the night. That comes later, but fed with the smaller coal so it burns low and steady rather than bright. You want it to last. You do not want to be putting good lumps on it at 7:30 for the pleasure of watching them go by 9. Your husband has the newspaper. He bought it at the station for a halfpenny, and it has been in his overcoat pocket all the way home and is slightly damp, and he opens it flat on the table where the lamp is, which means everybody else has to work around it. This is a nightly negotiation, and neither of you has ever won it. Here is something worth understanding about the winter evening in a house like this. It is the reading season. That is not a poetic way of putting it. It is a plain description of the calendar. In June, a clerk comes home at 6:15 to 4 more hours of daylight, and he goes out again, or he digs the yard, or the children are in the street until 9. In January, he comes home into the dark, and the dark lasts 14 hours, and there is one warm room and one lamp, and what people do in that room with that lamp is talk, read, sew, and teach the children. The material for it had become extraordinarily cheap in the space of about 30 years, and this is one of the genuinely large changes of the century, more consequential in daily terms than most of what gets put in the history books. A daily paper cost a halfpenny or a penny, a weekly cost a penny. The cheap reprint novel, the sort with paper covers and small close print, cost 6p, and if you were content with the very cheapest, 3p. A generation earlier, a new novel came out in 3 volumes at half a guinea a volume, which is to say it cost more than a week of your servant's wages, and nobody at your income level bought one. They were not for you. By 1897, the same book, 4 or 5 years later in a paper cover, costs less than a pound of beef. And there is the library, which costs nothing at all. Islington has one, and so does nearly every district of London by now. Built and stocked out of the rates and out of the money of men who had made fortunes in soap and steel and wanted their names on a building. You may borrow from it. Your husband certainly does. There is a reading room where a man may sit with the newspapers, which matters more than it sounds, because a reading room is warm and lit and does not charge for the privilege, and for a great many men in this city on a January evening that is the whole of the attraction, and the reading is secondary. There are other evenings available if you want them and can pay. The Magic Lantern Show at the Church Hall, 2p, views of the Holy Land or the Arctic or the Zulu War, the lecturer working the slides with a boy to change them, the penny reading, the choir practice, the temperance meeting, which is often a concert with a short speech attached, and everybody knows this and nobody says it. Down the road there are households with a piano in the front room, bought on the instalment plan at 10 shillings a month for 3 years, and a daughter learning to play it badly, and this is a matter of open comment among the neighbours in both directions. You do not have one. You have thought about it. You have done the arithmetic on the 10 shillings a month more than once, and each time the arithmetic has ended the same way, which is that 10 shillings a month is coal. So the evening is the lamp and the table. The middle child has a slate and a copybook, because there is homework, and there is homework because school is now compulsory and inspected, and the inspector comes and asks questions, and the master's reputation rides on the answers. Reading, writing, arithmetic, spelling lists, a poem to learn by heart which will be recited on Friday, and which is being learned tonight by the method of saying it aloud 11 times while everyone else in the room tries to think about something else. You hear the spelling. You always hear the spelling. It is understood in this house, and in 10,000 others like it, that the father earns the money and the mother hears the lessons, and the reason is partly that the father has been at a desk since 8 in the morning and is tired, and partly something less flattering, which is that a good many clerks were themselves educated indifferently and would rather not be caught out on long division by a 9-year-old. You would not be caught out. You went to a British school until you were 13, and you were good at it. You can do compound addition of pounds, shillings, and pence faster than your husband, though you have never made an issue of this, and you run the household accounts, which is the same skill applied to something that matters. You correct the slate. You make the child do the sum again rather than telling them the answer, which the school does not always bother with. This is unpaid teaching delivered nightly for years by a woman with no training and no title, and the entire national system of elementary education in this country quietly depends on it. A child who has someone at home to hear the spelling learns to spell. A child who does not very often does not. Nobody in 1897 has written this down as policy. Everybody in every street knows it perfectly well. Now, the question of what you read. There is a version of you that exists in the magazines, and she is worth describing because you have met her on the page 100 times. She reads improving works. She reads a little history, a life of some good woman, a volume of sermons on Sunday, poetry of a wholesome kind, and articles on the management of the home. She does not read novels except carefully chosen ones. She certainly does not read the paper. Or if she does, she reads the parts about the royal family and the weather and skips the rest, because politics and crime and finance are not her province and will only unsettle her. That woman does not exist. She has never existed. She is an instruction dressed as a description. What you actually read is the newspaper when your husband has finished with it and gone to see about the back door, and you read all of it, including the parts you are not supposed to want. You read the police court column, which is where you find out what has been happening in your own district and to people whose names you half recognize. You read the shipping and the trade news because it tells you what things are going to cost in 6 weeks. You read the advertisements with real attention because they are how you know what a pair of boots ought to be priced at before you go and argue about a pair of boots. And you read fiction. Sixpenny reprints borrowed and lent along the street until they come apart at the spine. The weekly serial, a chapter at a time, which everybody in 3 houses is following simultaneously and discussing at the front gate as though the people in it were relatives. Nobody thinks this is a high pursuit. It is the pursuit of about 4/5 of the literate population of this city, and it is what the cheap press was built to supply. There is a particular pleasure in it that is easy to miss from a distance. You have been on your feet since 5:30 in the morning. You have laid a fire, cooked 3 meals, been out in the fog with a basket, turned shirts, mended, nursed a cough, and dealt with 2 deliveries and a neighbour. At 8 o'clock you sit down in the chair by the range with a book on your knee, and for perhaps 40 minutes nobody requires anything of you. That is the whole of your leisure. It arrives once a day, in winter, in the dark, at the price of a paraffin lamp. At 8:30 it starts to break up. The poem is judged good enough. The slate is wiped. The youngest, who has been asleep against you for 20 minutes while pretending to listen, is carried as far as the door and then put down and made to walk, because you are not carrying a child of 5 up a flight of stairs at your age, and there is no sense in starting. The bricks have been in the bottom of the range oven since tea. You take them out with the cloth, 3 of them, dark and dry and hot enough to want handling briskly, and you wrap each one in a piece of old flannel and knot it. This is the whole of the household's bed-warming technology, and it is entirely adequate. A brick holds its heat for hours. It costs nothing, because you already own the brick, and you already lit the fire. Then the stairs. You go up with the candle in one hand, and the passage takes the warmth out of you in the first 4 steps. There is no fire above this floor, and there has not been one since the youngest had the measles 2 winters ago. The bedroom is the temperature of the yard, or very near it, and the children go into the beds fast, straight in, boots off and clothes off and under, with the brick already down by their feet doing its work, and the sheets are cold for about 90 seconds, and then they are not. You hear the prayers. You take the candle away, because a candle left in a room with a child in it is how houses burn, and everybody knows a story. And then you stand on the landing for a moment in the dark with the candle shielded, listening to the house go quiet above you, and thinking in a practical way, and not a sad one, about the damper on the range and how much coal is left in the scuttle for the morning. Down again then, and the kitchen after the landing feels almost tropical, which tells you nothing about the kitchen and everything about the rest of the house. The last hour of the day is not rest. It is preparation, and it is the most consequential hour you will spend, because everything that happens tomorrow morning before 6 depends on what you do in the next 40 minutes while your feet ache and the lamp is burning down. You start with the damper. The range has an iron plate that controls how much air the fire draws, and it is the difference between a fire that eats a scuttle of coal overnight and a fire that sleeps. You push it nearly closed, nearly, fully closed, and the fire dies, and you are laying it cold at 5:30 in the dark with numb fingers, which costs you 3/4 of an hour and a temper. left open, and you wake to grey ash and a bill you did not intend. Then the banking itself. You take the slack, which is the fine dusty coal that gathers at the bottom of the cellar and is worth about half what the lumps are worth, and you spread it over the burning bed in a layer thick enough to smother the flame without killing the heat underneath. Damp it very slightly if it is too dusty. What you want is not a fire, but the memory of one, a red core sealed under its own waste, breathing about as much as a sleeping animal. Done properly, it will hold 9 or 10 hours. In the morning, you rake the crust off, and there beneath it is a heart of live coal, and you feed it kindling and it comes straight back. Nobody taught you this in any formal way. Your mother did it in front of you for 18 years, and you absorbed it the way you absorbed language. It is a real technique with real variables, the quality of the coal, the draw of the chimney, the damp in the air, the age of the fire bricks, and you have adjusted for all of them tonight without consciously naming one. While that settles, you lay tomorrow. The kindling goes on the fender to dry, split fine, the paper twisted into knots because a loosely crumpled sheet burns too fast, and a tight one will not catch. 2 scuttles are checked. The coal one filled from the cellar so you do not have to go down there before daylight. The ash pail emptied into the bin in the yard where the dustman will take it on Thursday. The kettle is filled and set at the back where it will be lukewarm by morning, which saves you 5 minutes and a little heat. The bread crock is checked. The porridge oats are put to soak in a pan with water and a pinch of salt, covered on the shelf above the range because soaked oats cook in a quarter of the time, and a quarter of the time is a quarter of the fuel. The children's boots come off the fender and are set toe-in under the dresser, newspaper out of them, dry now, or dry enough. Your husband's overcoat is turned so the other shoulder faces the warmth. The wet stockings on the airer are moved to the end nearest the flue. Then the small securing of a house at night. The scullery window has a catch that has never sat right, and you wedge it with a folded card. The back door is bolted top and bottom. The front door is locked and the chain across. You look at the gas tap at the wall and turn it off at the meter because a mantle left barely open is a real danger, and you have known of it happening. The lamp goes out last but one. You take the candle instead. And the passage in a terraced house at 10:30 in January is a genuinely cold place. The tiles hold the cold like stone, which they are. You go along it with the candle cupped, past the parlour door, which is shut, which it has been since Sunday and will be until Sunday, and you feel the difference in the air even through the door, the way you can feel an open window in another room. Up the stairs, past the children's door, which is ajar, and no sound behind it but breathing. Your own room is the temperature of the street. That is not a figure of speech, and it is not a complaint. It is simply a fact about a house with no fire above the ground floor and no insulation whatever. Single glazed sash windows, bare boards under a strip of carpet, a chimney breast on the outer wall drawing cold down into the room all night. On a still January night, the bedroom might sit at something like 40 degrees. You undress in stages, which is the sensible order, outer layers off, nightgown on over the last of the underclothes, and only then the removal of what is beneath, so that at no point are you standing in that air with nothing on you at all. The bed is cold for a minute and a half. Then the flannel-wrapped brick at your feet and your own body heat make a pocket of warmth about the size of yourself, and you stay inside it, and that is the whole of the night's arrangement. Now, before the candle goes out, it is worth setting down what this day has actually consisted of, because it will not be recorded anywhere else. You managed fuel. You judged a fire's temperature by hand and by colour a dozen times, cooked on it without a thermostat or a thermometer, and banked it so it would survive the night. You knew to within a few pence what every hour of that fire cost, and you made continuous decisions about which rooms deserved warmth and which did not. And you got a family of 5 and a servant through a January day inside a coal budget that would not stretch to a mistake. You managed food. You bought daily because there was no other way to keep it. In a market where January prices were not the prices of June, and you turned flour and sweat and a cheap cut and a bone into 3 meals that fed 6 people, and nobody at that table went short. You managed textiles. You dried a household's worth of wet wool in one warm room without ruining any of it. You mended, turned, patched, darned, and let down, and by doing so you extended the life of every garment in the house by a year or more, which is a saving you could put a figure on if anybody ever asked you to. You managed illness. You judged a cough, treated it, watched it, and knew. This is the part that matters, the point at which you would stop treating it yourself and spend money you did not have on a doctor. That judgment is a clinical judgment. It was made on experience, and it was made correctly. And you managed people. A husband, 3 children, a servant of 19, a street of neighbors whose small favors you kept in balance as carefully as any ledger. You taught reading at a kitchen table. You settled accounts with 4 tradesmen and kept credit good with all of them. All of it is skilled. All of it is continuous. None of it stops for a season or a Sunday, and none of it is work. That is not an opinion. It is an administrative fact. When the census comes round, the enumerator's book will have a column headed for profession or occupation, and against your husband it will say railway clerk, and against the girl in the attic it will say general domestic servant, and against your name it will say nothing at all, or it will say the word that means nothing at all. Wife, unpaid, unlisted, not counted in any measure of what this country produces. You draw no wage. You have no claim on your husbands. What is in the tea caddy on the mantel is there by arrangement and custom, not by right. And the arrangement in this house is a decent one, and decency is not the same thing as security. If the arrangement ended, and arrangements end by accident, by illness, by a railway company reorganizing its clerical staff, you would find that 20 years of this expertise converts into almost nothing you could sell. There is no certificate for it. There is no reference. The skills are worth a great deal, and the labor market has almost no way to pay you for them except by putting you into somebody else's kitchen at £12 a year with a girl's wage and a girl's attic. This is not a criticism of you. You did not build the arrangement, and you cannot dismantle it from inside a scullery in Islington in 1897. It is an observation about the structure, and the structure is this. The competence was entirely real, and the system that depended on it had no method whatever for recording that it existed. Both things are true at once. Hold them both. The candle goes out. Below you, under 2 floors of cold air, the banked fire is doing exactly what you built it to do. The slack has crusted over. The red core beneath it has drawn itself small and patient, and is giving off almost nothing now, a low, steady warmth into an iron box in an empty kitchen, minding its own business until 5:30. The house settles. Somewhere a beam contracts and knocks once, the way it does every cold night, and you do not wake for it. And on the washstand, 6 feet away in the dark, in the jug you emptied and refilled before you came up, the water has already begun to change. A film first, too thin to see, then a skin of ice, spreading slowly out from the glazed rim towards the middle, taking the whole surface by 2 in the morning, thickening a little towards dawn. It will be waiting for you when you wake.